This is the regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioners Soboroff, Figueroa Villa, Kim, and Salzman are present, and we have a quorum. Number one on the agenda, consent agenda items. We have no comment cards. Would a commissioner wish to pull an item?
Approval of items 1A, B, and C.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Number two.
Commission comments. Any commission comments this morning? Okay.
We do have 3 comment cards, sir.
Okay.
Okay, we have Prentice Jenkins, Agustin Civada, and the Red Chief Hunt.
Morning, sir.
Morning. Prentice Jenkins, publisher City Life newsletter, activist since 1991.
Can't hear you today. Is the mic on? Yes.
Testing. Yeah.
There you go.
Regarding relative to attendance and participating in meetings, Government Code Section 54950, and enacting this chapter, the legislature finds and declares that the public commissions, boards, and councils, and other public agencies in the state exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. It is the intent of the law, that their actions be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly. The people of this state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. The people, in delegating authority, do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over their instruments that they have created. That is the Ralph M. Brown Act, 54950. If anyone wants to know what Mr. Brown looks like, that is Ralph M. Brown. He wrote this, so we have the right to come in here and speak. And he says that it actually happened to him when he came to these meetings in the 1940s. Ralph says that when he came to these meetings, that they would say one thing publicly and they do something else privately. And this is the man that passed the law. He was absolutely
Thank you. Next.
Agustin Civada. Please let the record reflect Commissioner Johnson is now present.
Okay, could I commence speaking about the situation here? Well, you know, I recently saw in the newspaper that there's a split between Chief Beck and the Police Protective League. And I just wondering why, trying to figure out what has been happening, having fought battles against the serial genocide of our people by the LAPD and other police agencies. I'm trying to analyze it potentially mechanically and everything, but I think the question is psychological. The thing is, when police kill somebody, or the reason they kill is to get an orgasm, a psychological orgasm based on power. We put this black person down, we put this Mexican down, and you're serving Donald Trump and all these people who like that, but it's a psychological orgasm, complete orgasm, and the Police Protective League and all of the people in their lobbying in Sacramento, along with the people like Kamala Harris, who are not doing anything about all these things that are going wrong within the prosecutors' division all over. They are not doing their job, and they're not going to stop this orgasm. And people say we got to train better, we got to train the police better so that they know what to do, but they already know what to do because they have that gun, and they rub the gun, and it's an orgasm. Every time they kill, it's an orgasm, and we got to stop that. You know, that's the only way we can really change them, and they have to have psychological training. The police are in this situation, the vast majority of them, when they have that gun. And Mr. Johnson, he should know about that. He's the president. And you need to check that out about what is going on internally with the police department and the individuals. Like when they killed Angie Guzman, they got an orgasm, two of them, a probation officer and a trainee. They got their orgasm when they emptied their guns in them. 6 shots into her belly, and her intestines came out down over here on San Pedro Street. And that's what you got to do. Stop the orgasms.
Thank you for your comments.
The Red Chief Hunt.
The Red Chief Hunt on the record. Here's what I can't understand. Why the commissioners didn't come out and say anything about the rape that took place in Hollywood. That is a goddamn shame that the police is raping goddamn prostitutes. And I just don't understand. This is what everybody said. I'm going to play it for you guys in white terms so that you can understand. Never trust the police, because I just really don't get this, and it's just really baffled me that this would even go on. I mean, you guys are just like, well, we call the police to trust them, but we can't trust them. What's up with that? Maybe you guys might understand here.
Fuck the police coming straight from the underground. The young nigga got it bad cause I'm brown, not the other color.
Yeehaw!
They have the authority to kill a minority. Fuck that shit cause I ain't the one for a punk motherfucker with a badge and a gun to be beaten on. Thrown in jail, we can go toe-to-toe
This is what LAPD,
Fucking
this
with
is
me
how much
cause I'm a
respect they got.
teenager with a little bit of gold and a pager, searching my car, looking for the product, thinking every nigga is selling narcotics. You'd rather see me in the pen than me and Lorenzo rolling in a benzo. Beat a police out of shape when I finish. Bring the yellow tape. 2 tape off the scene of the slaughter. Still get swole off red and water. I don't know if they be facts or what they search a nigga down and be grabbing his nuts. And on the other hand,
Now, let me tell you something about this. You guys are raping, molesting up in Hollywood. It's not only going on in Hollywood, it's going on in all the divisions. I lost a lot of respect when that report come out and the commissioners didn't say nothing about it. Ow!
Thank you. We're now on item number 3, report of the Chief of Police, Chief Beck.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners. A number of things occurred over the weekend, and we have an incident ongoing right now in the Lermart Park area of Southwest Division.
Brother Africa was murdered in Skid Row 1 year ago today, and that is the people's business. You cannot kill Africa. We will not allow this right.
Everybody standing. You are being disruptive.
Warning, take a seat, second warning, all those standing.
Let me talk. Martinez.
This is a warning. If you are standing, please be seated or you will be asked to leave.
We won't allow a Skid Row task force.
Okay, everyone that is standing now has to leave.
We will not go away. We will not go away. This meeting is a park. You can't kill Africa. We ain't going nowhere. You can't kill Africa. You can't kill Africa. We will not allow you to kill Africa.
Listen.
Kill Africa.
Can't kill Africa. Can't kill Africa. Can't kill Africa.
Yeah, I'm going to send you the phone so you can log in if you want to hear it.
We're going to take a recess. Everyone that has been standing and been disrupting the meeting is not allowed back.
How dare you? 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 Tell someone to get out. As if we don't take your salary. How dare you? How dare you? How dare you? You can't kill
It's the wrong day to try and get on TV. Super Tuesday, they ain't gonna get on TV today.
Right.
Oops, what a waste. Between them and Trump. What about that other dude who never even showed up?
We are back from recess. Chief, please continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As I was saying, we had some incidents which I will address that occurred during the weekend, and then we have one ongoing incident that is occurring in Leimert Park at this moment. Earlier this morning, a plainclothes Los Angeles police officer, who happens to be female, African American, was seated in her vehicle as part of an operation that was being conducted in that neighborhood. She was the subject of a drive-by shooting. Individual fired at least 5 rounds, most of them striking her vehicle and narrowly missing her. She's a 10-year veteran of the Los Angeles Police Department. We are thrilled that she survived this attack. Her father is a Los Angeles police officer, and she has a brother that's a Los Angeles police officer. Over this weekend, we had 12 individuals shot in the city of Los Angeles. 10 of those were gang-related shootings. Because of this uptick in gang violence, we've done a number of operations addressing the specific gangs that were involved. We have also placed majority of our plainclothes officers into uniform as to increase our visibility, but also to focus the department's attention on violent crime that is occurring. So far, year to date, we have had 48 homicides. Over half of them have been gang-related. We have 11 more homicides so far this year than last, and our overall violent crime is up about 11%. Property crime, however, particularly in the areas of burglary and theft, are down, and so this gives us a total crime picture that is slightly reduced from last year. So we're at about a 0.5% decrease from last year overall.
Chief, I'm
Yes.
sorry, the overall violent crime was up 12, did you say 12%?
Yes.
And homicides are up what percent?
We have 11 more than last year. It's early in the year, so that 11 number swings it to 29%.
Okay, thank you.
Shootings are up in the city of Los Angeles. The victim shot at 11.9% increase. Part 1 crime is at an increase in Central Bureau, increase in South Bureau, decrease in Valley Bureau, and a decrease in West Bureau. Congratulations to Chief Grimala's here, and she'll be given part of her report. They lead the city in overall crime reduction. Gang crime, particularly homicide, has shown an increase. Total gang crime, although is up only 3%, gang homicide up 28%, and that is a primary driver of our increase in homicides and the primary object of our enforcement strategies to deal with this. Traffic collisions are up slightly in the city of Los Angeles. Hit and runs down slightly. Motor vehicle versus pedestrians down 8.8%. Bicycle-involved traffic collisions so far this year to date are down significantly, although, as I've stated about all these statistics, you know, we're very early in the year, and it's not time to draw long-term conclusions. Sworn personnel on payroll, 9,894, plus 31 recruits that are in the academy that are not yet on payroll, so that brings us to 9,925 sworn personnel. 2,692 civilian personnel assigned, and not included in that are 585 vacant civilian positions, primarily in our clerical side, our detention officer side, and our PSRs. We have about 400 reserve officers, 372 specialist volunteers, 58 chaplains, and 7,375 cadets in our program at this point. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah. Chief, I just want to say loud and clear that on Saturday and Sunday, a whole bunch of your people, a whole bunch of our people, men and women of LAPD, worked long and hard hours to make the Academy Awards, which were watched by people all over the world, safe. And I want to say thank you to each and every one of those people who worked those long and hard hours to keep the people who went to and spoke at the Academy Awards safe.
Do we have any?
And that, of course, that's a significant drain on department resources. Some of it's reimbursed, some of it's not. This is a world-class city. We have to police those kind of events. But when you're a small police department, they create a significant drain, especially when you have increase in violent crime on the same weekend.
Thank you. We do have 5 comment cards, sir. We have Prentice Jenkins, Agustin Cebada, the Red Chief Hunt, Michael Williams, and Ted Hayes.
Prentice Jenkins, published a City Life newsletter, activist since 1991. Got a little show and tell here. You always get a civic lesson.
Email, photos, our phones are like a diary of our daily lives. Private information, a long list of civil liberties groups worry is vulnerable to a high-tech search and seizure.
In the old days, police couldn't go to every single person's door, searching every single person's home in order to find one bad guy. And that's similar to what may be happening here.
Jessica Price of the ACLU of Southern California is talking about cell site simulators, or MC catchers. About the size of a suitcase, they can help police identify and track cell phones around them, including those of suspects. They work by sending out a signal stronger than those of your cell phone company.
So say you or I just happen to be walking near a crime scene. We have our cell phones with us. We're not on it, but our phone is constantly searching for a signal. It thinks it's pinging off our carrier's tower, when in fact, it's connecting to the device.
The ACLU likens it to the digital age, colliding with the centuries-old Fourth Amendment.
It doesn't just go after the bad guys. This device, which mimics a cell phone tower, sends signals into your pockets, into your household, wherever your cell phone may be, to get information about you.
Most local agencies' devices can't eavesdrop on calls or texts, but a law enforcement source tells us the LAPD could be using even more sophisticated software that can intercept data and even pinpoint social media posts. We wanted to put those questions to Chief Charlie Beck.
I can't answer them.
In fact, a long list of civil liberties groups say the LAPD has refused to turn over documents or flat out ignored public records requests, even though others, like the LA County Sheriff, have turned over some information. We asked Chief Beck about that.
Well, no, it's not that we don't want to, so we don't think we're legally required to.
Here's why.
Agustin Cebada, the Red Chief Hunt.
Here's what I got to say about the Oscars. Fuck the Oscars. No black folks. Seems that seems to be a big problem in L.A. Black folks working. Even me, I've been arrested 74 times for working, trying to feed my family. And here's what I got to say about that again. I just really don't understand why they want to arrest me for working. This is for working. This is for me trying to feed my family. That's what they're trying to do. This is why crime is up, because I can't work. People like me can't work. I can't feed my family. I can't feed my family on welfare. I was down there working peacefully on the boardwalk. Arrested for working. No, I'm not selling narcotics. For working? For working? 74 times for working, going through federal court, working, trying to feed my family. Matt, I'm ready to make the movie called Fuck the Police, $400 million in that one. Maybe they might let us work in Hollywood again. No Oscars for the blacks, no word. Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter.
Michael Williams, Ted Hayes.
In order to clear the room, it's not a room, it's a meeting. A room with a meeting in it. So once the meeting is in recess, there's no authority from anyone other than the Board of Commissioners. So theoretically, the persons who were told to leave did not have to leave. Penal Code Section 403 is disrupting a public meeting. Well, there was no meeting taking place. And I hope you probably realize now that in order to clear the entire room, it requires a vote of the entire board. Now, protect and serve. Understand that when the Ku Klux Klan has a rally, most intelligent people would recognize it might be a dangerous situation between counter-protesters. But when the police department says, we will not be there unless you pay us, sign a contract, we'll show up, and we'll protect the Ku Klux Klan members. But we'll be nearby in case something bad might occur. Now, most people don't realize police agencies have no requirement to protect anyone, not anyone. That's not required. Most cities are not required to even have a police department. Most people don't realize how police don't have an obligation or a duty under law to protect the Klan nor anyone. And that's a problem. I hope commissions who recognize they have a duty to set policy has put in place a policy where if the police and any person can recognize a dangerous situation, the department will respond in some manner.
Thank you. We're now on item number 4, regular agenda items. We do have comment cards on A, B, C, and D.
Second.
Thank you. We'll begin with the verbal presentation and update. What? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Vote.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. So that was 4E?
Yes.
4E.
Mr. President, if I may suggest, since I assume that 4B will take a while,
yes,
that you would take out of order 4C and D to have those presentations done, and the staff can be excused.
Sounds good. Let's start with 4C.
Okay. 4C, Department's verbal presentation and discussion relative to an update regarding the Operations South Bureau Narcotics Enforcement Detail Command Accountability Performance Audit, AD number 14-064.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Chief Bill Scott, as you guys know, and sitting beside me is Lieutenant Daryl Beltius, who is our South Bureau gang coordinator. And I wanted him to be here. He is largely responsible for maintaining and initiating the systems and compliance in all of our NED operations. So Lieutenant Belty has put some systems in place, as have some of the commands that were struggling in the last time we met. So we'll go through that and answer any questions that you have. During our last session, when we gave a presentation on the net audit, Commissioner Kim asked which division was struggling the most, and the answer that I gave you was 77th at that time. They had gone through some changes with their supervision based on some disciplinary issues, and that supervisor has since been replaced with a new supervisor. And with that, over half the unit has also rotated out, and new officers have been brought into that unit. So I want to give an update on some of the systems that they put in place to rectify the shortcomings in the last audit, and then give a status on what we're doing on the Bureau in order to maintain the inspections to ensure that we don't slip. As a matter of fact, I'll start with the Bureau first, and then I'll zero in on 77th and then the other commands. Lieutenant Belty has put together a comprehensive monthly inspection schedule specifically for NED, and we have been doing them, but this is more comprehensive than what we had done in the past. So every month we're going to inspect a different topic based on the topics that were in the CAPA audit, and I'll just read through it. It'll take just a minute to read through it, just to give you an idea. The month of January, the topic was the standard-based assessments, or the rating reports. We had some issues with our compliance in that area, so that's what we looked at the month of January 2016. February, this month, we're looking at net arrest, booking, and charge reports. Next month, March, we will be taking a look at property reports. April, detective activity logs / daily journals. May, booking approvals. June, search warrants and search warrant tracking logs. July, NED arrest reports and booking approvals. August, selection and assignment of personnel to NED. September, compliance with the 8-hour mandatory plainclothes training. October, search warrant service tactical planning. November, area NED detective case envelope and arrest packages. And December of this year, the inspection overview. Basically, we'll do a recap of the year and then set our schedule for the following year in December. So with that, it does two things, and these audits will be comprehensive for every narcotics enforcement detail in the Bureau, not just one. And that's ongoing. We've retooled our audit team. We lost some people when we last met. We had lost some officers due to promotions. Those officers have been replaced, so we're up and running, and our audit team is in full swing. As for the 77th Narcotics Enforcement Detail, some of the shortcomings on the last audit, check-in for specialized units, there was a 66% compliance. Evaluation of detective activity logbooks, there was a 0 compliance. DPS and timekeeping documentations, 20%. Use of observation posts, 0. It was 0 out of 1. Use of the narcotics report, 319, 37%. Evaluation of search and remedy warrants, we did well with 100% compliance. And then evaluation of confidential informants and Secret Service funds, we had none during that period, so we couldn't look at that. The CAPA audit didn't address that. What the new Detective 3 has done is put together and tighten up the existing systems and put some new systems in place. For instance, for the check-in procedure and specialized units, moving forward, we wanted to make sure that the WASH commanders were kept apprised of when the officers were checking in, signing on. So one of the ways to do that is we have instituted mobile digital command, mobile MDCs for the NED unit. And I believe 77th is the only unit in the city that's doing that. But that gives the WASH commanders the ability not only to have them checked in, but to monitor what they're doing. That was put in by the new detective coordinator. Also, the WASH commanders are, as they're supposed to, any changes in the DPS, the daily reports and deployment, that will be given to the WASH commander. At the end of WASH, the NED supervisor advises the WASH commander of unit status and documents the WASH commander's name and serial number on the sergeant's log. Now, one of the things that we had some slippage on the last time was some of the names were not accurate. So the mobile MDC will help in that regard, and also with the checks and balances, that should not be an issue for us any further. As far as the evaluation of detective activity logbooks, the OIC is requiring the logbooks be turned over for review to ensure compliance with G&D Order Number 3. prior to the investigators leaving the station and going out to the field. This is a tightening up. It's like we said, it's rules that were in place. We just needed to tighten them up and make sure that we're complying with them. So once that's reviewed, the supervisor will return the daily activity logs books, and then they'll use them for the next shift and next week. DPS timekeeping documentation. The D3 there was no requirement for the D3s to log on or indicate the end of watch, start of watch times is what we found. So what has been put in place is that the requirement has been made that the officer's status is logged on, and that will require that only the officer, basically what they were doing, both officers were signing in on the same daily activities log. So each officer has to document their status, and they don't do it as a team. So that gives us some specificity as to where our folks are when they're logging on, who's not logging on when they're supposed to. And this is an attention to detail issue that we mentioned in the last one, and it's, again, a tightening up of systems that should have been done previously. Use of observation posts and operation plans. We had only one in the CAPA audit. However, we've met with them. Lieutenant Beltius, myself, Commander Kingarides has met with the NED unit, and what we're requiring of the NED unit is that when in doubt, do an operations plan. And what I mean by that, with narcotics enforcement, what we find oftentimes is officers might get a tip, and they will do what's called a drive-by. They'll drive by the location to take a look and see what's going on. Sometimes those turn into extended investigations where they stop, they see something, they end up actually doing an observation post. And even though it's pre-planned, it's not really pre-planned because they don't really know what they have before they get there. What we're requiring in those situations is if you're going to do a drive-by, at the minimum, it should be discussed with the supervisor. And if it's something that's going to require an observation post, they are required to do an observation, a plan for it. So those plans will be stored and cataloged in the 77th Narcotics Enforcement Office. That way, when we check and compare what they did in their logs to whether we're supposed to have a plan, that plan should be there. This is an enhancement as well. It's the policies have been in place, but we've kind of taken a step further to ensure the accountability. Evaluation of Ramey warrants. We did good on that, and we'll keep that going. There are no changes in our procedures there or no enhancements. And then evaluation of confidential informants. Although we did not have any in that period, it was mainly due to we had shut down that unit due to some of the issues that we raised. So we do expect informants to be a part of their daily routine and businesses, and we'll make sure that we comply with the department's policy on the informants. In terms of the inspections that we've done, we did an inspection outside of our monthly inspections schedule on the 77th detail because they were the ones that needed the most help, we believed. So we did do an inspection on that detail. And what we looked at were the Sergeant Daily Reports, the Narcotics Report Form 319s, the operations plans, the NED work product, supervisory oversight, and significant risk management issues associated with NED operations. And that goes to the operations plans as well. They actually did very well on this assessment, and this was outside of our schedule, as I stated, but 77th did very well on this inspection. So we think that the new supervision and the new officers that are there in the unit has really made a difference, and our tightening up of some of the systems where we saw shortcomings also has made a difference. The last thing that I'd like to report on is the January standard-based assessment rating audit that we did, or inspection that we did. And our numbers were good overall. We had one command. Let me read it off to you. So on that particular inspection, as far as the SBAs being present, this was the objective in the CAPA audit, and we just followed the same objectives. As far as the SBAs being present in the divisional package, 100% across the board, and we audited 77 Southeast, Southwest, and Harbor. So 77, they were 8 for 8, Southeast 8 for 8, Southwest 8 for 8, Harbor 7 for 7. We still have some work to do on the SBAs being signed by the commanding officer within 60 days. 77th had 87%, 7 out of 8, and the one officer that didn't get it signed within 60 days had been on vacation, so it didn't get served in time. But they were 7 out of 8%. Southeast was 8 out of 8 for 100%, and Southwest was 5 out of 7 for 71%. So that definitely needs to be tightened up even further. Harbor was 6 for 7 of 85%. We also checked the audits for completeness and quality, and all the audits, we were 100% on all those areas of completeness and quality. So that was the January assessment. The February assessment has been completed as far as everything that has been looked at. However, we didn't have the write-up to present to you this morning, but the net arrest, booking, and charge inspection, that inspection has been done, waiting on the final written copy to be presented to Lieutenant Beltis and myself. So we can keep you posted on where that is as well. So that is our plan for now. We think that it really will put us where we need to be in terms of our net across the Bureau. So any questions that you have?
No questions, just comment. Sorry, I have a sinus cold. So I think my voice isn't working properly. But thank you for your responsiveness and congratulations on how quickly particularly 77th was able to get up to speed and implement those changes. Thanks.
Thank you.
And those inspections are not just at 77th, right? Because there were problems, obviously, in Southeast,
Yes.
Southwest, and Harbor as well.
Correct. They are across the board, across the Bureau. So each one that I read of the 12 that we're going to do monthly, it will be every command.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? Great, thank you.
We do have 2 comment cards. We have Prentice Jenkins and Yvonne Michelle Autry.
Do you mind waiting until the comments are complete?
Prentice Jenkins, published the City Life newsletter, activist since 1991. In terms of these numbers, do you have any numbers that relate to African Americans and Latinos being arrested for narcotic offenses, as opposed to whites in other areas that the LAPD patrols?
That wasn't the subject of this audit.
It's enforcement detail?
Accountability performance.
Okay, accountability performance. In terms of your performance, are you performing these raids in just African American and Latino communities, or these narcotic enforcements are they done in white communities with the same ratio? Because we know there's a huge problem in white suburbs with heroin. Young white kids are getting in high school and in college are addicted to heroin. So the question is, are you making the same arrest in white communities that you are in African American and Latino communities?
Mm-hmm. Again, that wasn't the subject of this audit and report. The subject of this audit and report was really related to record keeping around narcotics enforcement specifically in South Bureau.
Okay, so specifically in South Bureau, does your records that you're keeping reflect more African Americans and Latinos being arrested?
Yvonne Michelle Autry.
Well, just for the record, I'd like to go on record. First of all, I was denied access or entry this morning, and I was late. My colleagues were expressing their opinion, which is their right, inalienable right, and I was denied entrance by an Officer Moreno and his sergeant. And for the record, just last week, I submitted 2 requests to speak, and I was denied on both occasions, except for the one occasion when I had to stand.
You're off topic. That would be a comment for general public comment.
Well, I
this
just want
this
that
item
to
is
be.
specific.
I'll reiterate that as well, because it's my constitutional right to approach and to address those who are supposed to represent us as a community. So I want that. I will make that comment. But again, so that we don't have to riot and you have an excuse to arrest those of us who are peaceably, exercising our right to address the commissioner. So you are completely corrupted. And for the record, you make sure that your records accurately reflect that which has transpired at every occasion, every arrest, whenever officers are called out. There are many occasions I have experienced officers that have been dispatched to my apartment. On one occasion specifically, when I called the police on a white female, and the police were dispatched to my apartment with their guns drawn, stating that she had called the police on me. What big brother, what buddy, what big blue, what new world ordered off-duty or a black ops police officer was responsible for that for altering that particular response or record? I don't know. But you make sure that your records reflect that which really transpired in your body cameras and all of your surveillance, because I've experienced evidence that has been tampered with on a personal basis, and also I've heard testimony from my colleagues as well, for the record and for your record as well.
There are no other comment cards on this item, sir.
Okay, thank you.
We're now
Thank you
on
very
item
much.
Item 4D, Department's Report dated February 25th, 2016, relative to the Gang Enforcement Detail Command Accountability Performance Audit, AD number 15-014. Sorry.
Good morning. It's nice to give an audit when you have a report when you have almost perfect compliance.
Yeah. Thank you for recognizing that, Commissioner.
Couldn't come up with a single question, so is there
I put a big happy face over it. And,
Thank you, Commissioner.
yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know that we need a report necessarily. Do any of my fellow commissioners have any questions? Do we have any comment cards?
We have two comment cards, sir. We have Prentice Jenkins and Ted Hayes.
Commissioner Kim, did you have any questions with respect to this item? Thank you. Did you say we have two cards?
Yes, sir.
Prentice Jenkins, publisher City Life newsletter, activist since 1991. In terms of your Gang Enforcement Detail Command Accountability Performance Audit, in this audit, does this audit discuss how many gang members were killed, how many of the people who were arrested were actually gang members? Because I know people who actually know gang members but are not gang members. And how many of those people in this audit who were actually not gang members but know gang members are still languishing in jail? Does that reflect?
Again, Mr. Jenkins, that's not the subject of this audit. If you look at the summary of findings, it gives a detailed breakdown of each of the areas looked into. And what you are asking about was not one of the areas that was the subject of this audit.
Okay, is that in that book, President?
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's why I asked if you could attach that to here. That is part of the agenda. Why
it's
is it in the
available
book?
outside, and it is available online.
Yeah, but everybody doesn't have
There are
the
hyperlinks.
internet.
There's public libraries throughout our city that have free internet access.
Yeah, but if it's part of the agenda, it needs to be attached to the agenda.
There are hyperlinks on the agenda.
Hyperlinks?
Hyperlinks through the internet to go to each one of these items.
As I said, not everyone can access the internet. There are people that don't know how to use the internet that come
Well,
here to
then
these
they're
meetings.
welcome to come down here to this building and look at the hard copy that's in our lobby.
Okay, is it possible to get these attached to this, though?
No, Mr. Jenkins, that will not happen. The Brown Act says that we have to make the items available. They are available in the back of the room, they're available online, and they are available in our office. That is in compliance with the Brown Act.
Okay, well, we'll debate that at some other time.
No debate, sir.
Ted Hayes.
Gang enforcement is not a term we hear very often in the community. What we hear about is gang suppression, gang prevention, but enforcement sounds rather curious. if there's a gang that's actually meeting or operating somehow, how do you enforce any laws against them for simply meeting? Okay, you can meet even if it's a criminal enterprise, unless there's an actual crime committed or being formulated. What can you do? Now, I am a person who is opposed to gang intervention groups because you can't prove a negative. You can't prove how many shots have not been fired or how many bodies that did not fall. But we spend quite a bit of money on these gang prevention operations because the concept is throw money at any and everything. It doesn't matter. So they throw money at these people who claim to be gang interventionists. But what do? Certainly if they know who killed who, the gangs wouldn't tolerate them circulating that information or even coming to them saying, don't do that again or don't retaliate. So we have a difficult time with gangs. Gangs started here in California and spread all across the nation. But I don't really believe that very much anything can be done. Most instances when persons are arrested for a crime, that might be a gang enhancement, but that's rather shaky and hard to prove, and any decent lawyer can get that thrown out. So I don't understand what gang enforcement happens to be. I will look at the memorandum in the back because there might be something that's informative on it.
Thank you. We have no other comment cards on this item, sir.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve this report?
Move to approve the item.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you. We're now on item number 4A, verbal presentation and update from the Commanding Officer and Community Police Advisory Board CPAB representative regarding community-initiated problem-solving, crime strategies, and other programs and goals within the Hollywood area.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
I'm Captain Pete Zarconi, the Commanding Officer of Hollywood area, and I would like to thank you for allowing us to present this morning. And I would like to introduce my brand new, newly elected CPAB co-chair, Mr. Bruce Remick. We had Gary Minzer in that chair for 16 years. So when I heard he was going to hang it up, the first person I thought of to replace him was Bruce, and thank God our democratic process worked and our CPAB members elected Bruce, and he's the right man for the job. So Bruce, turn it over to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, 3 weeks into the job, I was given the call by the captain that we had to do a presentation here today. So talk about feet to the fire. I wanted to give you an overview of our CPAB structure and what our accomplishments have been during the year 2015 and also what our future goals are for 16. We have approximately 50 community members consisting of representation from business, residential communities, neighborhood councils, social service organizations, elected officials, as well as members of the Hollywood Coalition. Members of the church councils, faith-based organizations, Red Cross, and senior leads all attend the meeting. Our subcommittees consist of emergency preparedness, which is very big within our CPAB, homeless outreach, which is also a hot project because it's named HOT, H-H-O-T, and then our nightclub committee, which I'll get into in a minute, but that's a very, very important committee that we do handle. Our 2015 completed efforts is that we created at Hollywood the Crime Analysis Detailed Unit. We expanded it tremendously. It was cramped into a small little office with various satellite outposts. It was now in one office. We organized a CPR, AED, automated electric defibrillator class, which Hollywood CPAB members attended. We CERT trained 60 members this year, so I think that brings our total up to about 130 total community members. Those aren't all CPAB members, but we allowed the community to attend this as well. Didn't do so well in Citizens Police Training Academy. We did 26, but we did get 26 people involved in that. And we participated and attended with Council District 13 meetings, Clergy Forum, African American Forum, days of dialogue, slow summits, which we had 2 last year. We'll have 2 this year. The new LA Fire Department Operations West Bureau headquarters grand opening, and the Aztec Rising Turkey giveaway, where we gave away, I think, approximately 100 turkeys to needy families. And this was all organized through our community group. Our division members work closely with city council members who are, in our instance, Mitch O'Farrell from the 13th District and David Drew from the 4th District. We also finally completed a 3-year grant for emergency preparedness. So little by little, we're getting the station prepared with emergency supplies and so forth. Also during 15, we presented Coffee with the Cops, where we had roll call and approximately 80 to 100 community members attended, as well as business owners. And our local businesses in Hollywood donated to fund the food, drinks, and coffee for this Coffee with Cops. We also initiated senior lead officer presentations at each CPAB meeting. We recently assisted with donations to supply bicycle helmets and participated in the bicycle safety program held at LeConte Junior High. So that was last year. This year, 2 weeks ago, we already got one goal finished. 2 weeks ago, under the great leadership of Deputy Chief Grimala, we participated in the Operations West Bureau CPAB Summit, which is held at the Peterson Museum. It focused on terrorism, and Deputy Chief Downing did a nice presentation. Very, very well attended, and probably one of the best commented on meetings that I've attended from CPAB. I mean, it was really a terrific meeting. We plan to enhance our social media communications. I recently have started a Facebook page. We're just in the process of that. And our Hollywood CPAB website is going to be presenting video presentations for subjects that concern the community, from the SLOs, from the captains, and from various community members. We are also planning to have a joint CPAB CERT meeting. We've never had the combined meetings before. We've talked with each other and so forth, but we do want to have a combined meeting. We're reaching out to have better interaction with our youth, especially with the Hollywood Division cadets. We want to have them attend one of our meetings. We want to continue, obviously, to promote our emergency preparedness at the town hall meetings, which are being held one next month, one actually this month, sorry, and one in May. We divide our town hall meetings into 2 because we have kind of the west side of Hollywood and then we have the east side of Hollywood. So it's better to, different issues have to be addressed. We are going to continue to schedule regular Coffee with a Cop for the community and business owners. We're going to reach out. One of our problems has been getting members that can really interface. We became more of just a reporting mechanism with neighborhood councils and so forth taking over a lot of our duties. So we're going to try to make our attendance, our CPAB meetings more inclusive and get various tasks going with our community members. Captain Dave Stalker from Communications has invited us, and we are going to participate in a field trip to Communications. For this year, we have 7 meetings planned, and we have 2 CPAB Slow Summit meetings. Town hall meetings, I'm sorry, as well as scheduling the Hispanic Forum in the 4th quarter. And we will continue to have our bi-monthly meetings with CPAB Nightclub Committee. One of the things we want to do is hold a surprise active shooter scenario during one of our regular meetings. I'm not sure how surprised it should be since some of our members are elderly, but at least we're going to show them what an actual shooting scenario looks like, and this is going to be with the help of Deputy Chief Grimala. And then our Emergency Preparedness Committee is working on the Hollywood Emergency Preparedness Neighborhood Asset Program, which is also being led by Deputy Chief Grimala to identify the assets within Hollywood. And we're not just talking food or water. We're talking about trucks, any sort of equipment that is needed in an actual emergency, tents, and et cetera. And finally, I'm going to let the captain talk about the next project, which is really a very exciting project that's happening in our watch commander's office.
So the project that Bruce is referring to is a huge undertaking. It's a watch commander technology project in which the watch commander office is being remodeled, and we're putting in the latest and greatest technology. A lot of the news stations have this capability, but Hollywood, as you know, being an older station, did not. We are going to put in new video screens, and the reason this is really appropriate to talk about with CPAB, because this would not have happened without the participation of CPAB. The fundraising that took place to get this done, the technology itself, the price tag came to about $41,000, and CPAB raised $31,000 of that $41,000 price tag. A lot of strong arming.
Yeah.
Just going in around the community?
They did. It's all community funded.
Yeah, congratulations.
So that's going to be a great project. They're under construction right now. They've gutted it, and they're putting it back together, and it's going to be beautiful. And one other thing that we always like to touch on at these presentations is how much CPAB contributes to our youth programs. The HPSA, our booster, is the fundraising arm of our CPAB, and all of our youth programs are supported through that effort. Our PAL program serves over 450 youth. Our cadets and junior cadets have about 175 kids all total, and our Tomorrow's Future after-school program services about 95 to 100 on any given school year. So that's kind of what they bring to the table as far as fundraising.
I wasn't in, but did you talk about recruitment of new members or how your membership is and the diversity of your membership?
Well, I touched on it briefly in that we're going to reach out and become more inclusive to our community members and try to get more, if I can use the word, more exciting meetings with the help of Captain Malachi as well. The meetings have become mainly presentation meetings, and we need to become more active. That's why I want the active shooting scenario, and that's why I want also to have the communications trip. We'd also like to do an air support trip. So I want to make the meetings more interesting. They have become boring. I'll be honest. They have. So we're going to try.
Mr. Saltzman.
Thank you. I just a few comments. I just want to thank you, Mr. Remick, for stepping up. Big shoes to fill, but I know your background, and I'm sure you'll do a terrific job. And really appreciate the time you're putting in to do this. Also want to thank Captain Zarcone, who's moving on and has done in my view, a wonderful job in Hollywood. Tremendous leadership, great community relations, and wish you all the best. I'm sure many people will miss you. And one last comment, just which it's in one sense a small thing, but speaks for the operation in Hollywood. About a month ago, I had a friend who was interested in volunteering in the youth program, had tried other things, not within the LAPD, but other places to get involved, and had been frustrated. He's retired and has great qualifications to be doing it, and he got in touch with you, but within a day or two, it may have been that day, but essentially immediately he was involved and is now volunteering in the youth programs, and he's as happy as could be, and I appreciate that very much, and know that just represents what happens on a daily basis there. I thank you very much for everything you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We do have 4 comment cards on this item. We have Prentice Jenkins, the Red Chief Hunt, Ted Hayes, and Susan Rocha.
Prentice Jenkins, City Life newsletter, publisher, activist since 1991. You say you're preparing for an active shooter. I suggest you prepare for an active shooter. One of those active shooters may be a cop someday. We know Christopher Dorner did it. So you can't say it won't be a cop, especially those firemen. You have no idea what type of heroin they're on. Yeah, there's a heroin addiction problem in the fire department. I suspect the police department knows it, but won't do anything about it. And in terms of this problem solving, have you solved the problem of this?
Jail, their bail set at $4 million each. Take a look at the video. Both officers were working out of the LAPD's Hollywood division when back in 2008 these allegations began surfacing against them, and now they are each facing multiple counts of forcible rape and rape by threat to arrest or deport, along with charges of oral copulation and sexual battery. In addition, Valenzuela faces a charge of assault with a firearm. Now, the victims in this case are 4 women ages 19 to 34 who each say they were sexually assaulted when the 2 officers were working as partners. All 4 of the women were stopped or arrested by the officers, who often worked undercover in unmarked vehicles, but the women say they were also forced to perform sex acts in black and white patrol cars with the officers wearing their uniforms.
These 2 officers have disgraced themselves. They've disgraced this badge. They've disgraced their oaths of office. I cannot fathom.
That was the chief telling you that they disgraced the badge. Guy stuck a gun to the woman's head. She thought he was going to kill her.
The Red Chief Hunt.
The Red Chief Hunt, that's just as equal as lynching, killing, repeatedly raped in the Hollywood division. But not only in the Hollywood division, but in every division. This has scarred everybody, from the Klan to the black folks to the Crips, the Bloods. I've never heard of the police officers raping repeatedly, oral copulation, and this is a record. You guys got to put that on record. Do you trust LAPD? Fuck no, man. This has got to be a sad day when you take over and you don't want to bring back the federal century. You kill people, you shoot people. Your own Metro says that they don't even have proper training. Hollywood's raping people now. Thank you.
Ted Hayes.
No one can deny knowing that the Girl Scouts of America exist. Unfortunately, the police department no longer cooperates with the Boy Scouts of America because of the homosexuality issue. Troop leaders could not be homosexual, openly or even discovered. Now, I would suggest that you support the Girl Scouts because they happen to be women, but I don't know whether the department has ever invited the Girl Scouts to participate in the organization they have. The presentations that were provided here some time ago pointed out that kids were given football and rap as an activity within the police department. Now, rap is how black people, who are some of the world's greatest musicians, found out how to take music out of music. There's no music in rap. A beat has no music. It's paradiddles. No do, re, mi. So I would suggest we look into the Girl Scouts. Recruiting Girl Scouts of America, have some relationship with them. When you look at their manual, look at the Boy Scouts of America manual, you'll find out these are things that are substantial for a very good life. Things you can do, not only in the forest, but escorting the old lady across the street. So look into that. Recruiting the Girl Scouts. I don't know whether they have a prohibition against homosexuality. I don't know. But you should find that out and make an effort to recruit them. And I believe the Boy Scouts have modified their prohibitions to some extent. You might invite them back in. Because if they come in with the training they've had and their manual, it's the thing that is useful for young people. No rap, no football. Let the dogs and the cats play with the balls.
Susan Rocha.
My problem is a noise problem. It's disturbing the peace. That police officers won't cite for noise violations. It's pretty bad. Divine Savior put up 4 loudspeakers that blast into my home 8 times or more a day, every day, with off-key tape recordings, off-key, of their off-key tape recorder bells and their off-key music and their church music and anything else that they feel like blasting into my home. Now, I feel like I have a right to peace and quiet in my own home. But I can't get LAPD to do anything about it. I can't get the city attorney to move on it. So I'm just stuck that you won't give me my peace and quiet that I'm entitled to. You can go and cite the people down at Venice Beach for their noise, but when it comes to a church, they can do whatever they feel like. Is that the way it is? That's what I want to know.
Where's the church?
In Northeast. It's Cypress Park, Divine Savior Catholic Church.
Mr. President, we are well aware of this circumstance.
Okay, thank you.
610 Cypress Avenue. And I've been through at least 5 senior lead officers that have spoken to them, and it goes in one ear and out the other. So when there is no cooperation, that's when you have to put teeth into the law and go out and cite. Just like other cities have done, they have cited, prosecuted, even jailed priests and ministers for noise violations. It is not a right for them to come into my home that's disrespectful, rude, to blast their noise into my home. That's not right.
Mr.
Is
President.
anybody going to do anything about that?
Thank you for your comments. It sounds like we're aware of it, so I'll look into it.
Aware of it, but you don't do anything about it. I have to hear that noise all day long.
We heard you.
So what's going to be done?
More public comments?
Is there any more public
We have no other
I
comments.
just want to provide some information, my colleagues, and in response in part to Mr. Hayes' comments. The Girl Scouts do not discriminate based on sexual orientation or gender identity. They never have. The Boy Scouts continue to discriminate on bases that violate the city's own non-discrimination ordinance with respect to religious views and with respect to disabilities. Regardless, the department has set up its own set of youth programs, the premier one being the cadets, but there are a variety of others, all of which are dramatic improvements over the programs that were provided previously by the Boy Scouts. And so to the extent anyone's seriously thinking about your suggestions, I just want to go on the record as saying I think it's a terrible mistake. I think the department's doing a tremendous job, and I fully support the department's efforts in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The only thing I would add is to the commissioner's comments is that the program has grown 5-fold since it became an LAPD program rather than a Boy Scout program, and it is by far the most successful youth program run by any municipal police department in the nation, and dwarfs all other Explorer programs or cadet programs.
And that's to great credit of the department. In fact, maybe what's happening will be the reverse, which is rather than police departments bringing in the Boy Scouts and other outside groups, that they will follow the pattern of the LAPD and do it themselves and do a better job. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you. We're now on item 4B, Department's presentation and discussion relative to the 2015 Annual Use of Force Report.
I just want to say one thing before. I'm noticing that the media is like taking pictures of little parts of this report and putting them out like they've totally analyzed the report and totally gone through everything. And we've seen this thing for 5 minutes. You're going to come back and we're going to have a big discussion about it. How about hey, hold your horses for a minute and take a minute to digest what you have before going too fast. There's a lot to learn here. Let's just see what's going on. It's ridiculous.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Captain John McMahon, Commanding Officer of Use of Force Review Division. Along with me is,
Officer Gonzalez, also from Use of Force Review Division. Good morning.
Officer Back, also from Use of Force Review Division. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hopefully by now, commissioners, each of you have gotten a copy of the executive summary and also hopefully a freshly printed copy of the full use of force report.
I just want to tell you that I know that maybe a couple of commissioners got a portion of it, but we just got it.
Yes.
Just not. We haven't opened it yet. Okay.
Yeah, and I understand. The purpose of this discussion or presentation today is basically just to give you an introduction of what you can expect to read. Not only does this report go into details about facts and data about use of force, but it also takes a moment to explain to the public what the processes are involved that go into our use of force adjudications. A lot of times we say, multi-level investigations, and the public generally doesn't know exactly what that means. So you can see that this being a public report, there's some time spent on what those processes involve.
Yeah, and just so everyone is clear on this panel, and for the public and for the media as well, the executive summary is, 60 pages? The full report is almost 300 pages. There is a lot of material to digest here. So we will certainly come back and revisit the information in this report. I'm sure not only me, but all of our fellow commissioners and members of the public and members of the media will have questions. There's a lot of information here to digest. But today is really an important step. There's an incredible amount of information here, the level of transparency here that we're providing. No other department in the country comes close to providing. These guys put this information together in 2 months, which is really extraordinary. New York does a much less comprehensive report, and it took them 9 months to come out with their report. So I'm really excited about today, and today's a start for the overview, which we're obviously anxious to have, and then we'll come back in a couple weeks and re-agendize it so we can get into greater depth on the full report.
And commissioners, partially the reason that you haven't had the report prior to today is because we wanted it to be a fresh discussion, not formed by the media's partial review and what they put forward, but also, I put a lot of pressure on Captain McMahon and his folks to get this done within the first 2 months of the year, and they worked round the clock tirelessly to get this done. The officers delivered reports to my house so I could review them. They were just I just can't thank them enough, for the effort they put in. Now, obviously, the content is what you're worried about, but what I want to congratulate them on is their steadfast desire to do what the chief asked them to do and what this commission wants them to do. They did a really, really good job.
Yeah, it was an ambitious timetable when you set it out, and I was impressed that you met it. I'm sure there were a lot of sleepless nights working on this to get it done. So why don't we jump right in?
Other like departments take 9 months to a couple years to get this information out to their respective communities, and I'm happy to say that we're able to accomplish the chiefs and Mr. President your request to get this report out.
Do you deal with issues like how 47 these early releases could have an impact on whatever is in here, or is that just for us to do as we
got into all kinds of socioeconomic and demographic information. That particular subject matter we did not get into. One of the things that once you dive into this report, it's going to raise a lot of further questions that are going to require further analysis. Without a doubt, it's we've just it's a tip of the iceberg. As in-depth and comprehensive as this report is, it does raise additional questions that will require further exploration. We fully expect that to get from the commission.
And I hope that the commissioners recognize that that's what this report's intended to do, is put forth the factual information about use of force within the Los Angeles Police Department, the city of Los Angeles. It doesn't answer those questions, nor was it intended to. It's intended to frame them so that this body and the department and the city can have the discussions as to the why. I mean, you'll see in here there are references to the huge increase in contacts with the mentally ill. Now they don't go into the reasons; they go into the fact pattern. The increase in suicide by cop. We can't, there's no why in this report. It's just the fact that it has increased and then show over time where those increases are, and then that will cause the discussions that I think this commission, this city, and I think even this nation want to have about police use of force. So this is the framework upon which we will build the discussion that I think needs to happen not only in LA but probably in the whole country.
I just ran a graphic, and I'll run it again. The incidents in which LAPD officers use force is extremely rare. I know the public in general, they review news stories on a nightly basis. There's probably not a news segment that doesn't air one type of use of force incident or another from one part of the country, and it gives off the perception that the use of force is a widespread occurrence. In all honesty, if you look at this graphic here, the department uses force on when we make arrests, and these are arrests where contentious situations where somebody is going to jail. 16.8 per 1,000 arrests result in the use of force.
How many arrests happened in 2015?
We documented, sir, that there were approximately 1.5 million contacts by LAPD.
No, but the arrests were about 100 and some thousand?
Yes.
Yeah, about 140.
Approximately 114,000.
114,000.
Yes, sir, correct.
I got 20 of them.
Yeah, Mazel Tov. Okay.
But that pales into comparison the overall number of public contacts that LAPD officers come in contact with on a daily basis.
So we have 114,000 arrests, and we have how many contacts?
About over 1.5 million. This next graphic here will run through. Each stick roughly represents about. What's that?
1,500.
About 1,500 people, and the graphic represents the overall larger number of 1.5 million people. If you take a look at this graphic and you kind of compare it to the total number of people that LAPD officers come in contact with, you can see that the incidents of use of force are even extremely more rare. In this case here, 1.3 use of force incidents per 1,000 contacts. And if you break it down by officer-involved shootings, we had to color just a small part of the toe on a single stick figure of that 1.5 million people to represent how often this would result in an officer-involved shooting.
Could you just give a little bit of a further explanation of what constitutes a public contact and what is included when we talk about use of force? Obviously, at the extreme end, we talk about officer-involved shootings, but at the other end, it's simple as a firm grip. Maybe you can get into a little bit of those details.
Yeah. What a public contact is not is when police officers go to schools or they go to community events. They come in contact with hundreds of people. At each one of these types of events. Those are not public contacts. Public contacts are your radio calls or your officer stops. Those are things that are calculated in what we define as
911 call. Is it 911 call?
A 911 call would count as a public contact. Yeah. So as you can see, that the number of uses of force are extremely rare, and unfortunately, I think it doesn't get the amount of play it should. But hopefully, this statistic kind of gives the commissioners and perhaps more important, the public, an idea of just how rare the use of force, the incidence of use of force is. In looking at this study this past couple months, one of the things that
could you also just go into a little detail of what constitutes a use of force, like what types of activities would be included in a use of force?
Yeah, Commissioner, we basically there's two types of, and we'll get into, we'll break that out in some detail in a little bit, but there's basically two types of use of force. You've got your categorical use of forces. It's about a series of 6 or 7 type of incidents that are serious in nature that require a force investigation division rollout. Those are your types of incidents that are your discharges of your firearms, your in-custody deaths, your upper body control holds, any intentional use of an impact weapon that hits a suspect in the head. Those are the types of things that we would call a categorical use of force and do an immediate roll-out team to do an in-depth investigation, collect evidence, interview witnesses right there within roughly about an hour of that incident occurring. It also includes those lesser types of use of forces, the non-categoricals, should that result in any type of hospitalization. So if we come in contact, we use force, and that particular individual ends up being hospitalized as a result of that use of force, that would then fall under the categorical realm and will be treated as a categorical use of force. Non-categorical use of forces that don't require hospitalization are your things like your basic firm grips to overcome active resistance, your joint locks, your twist locks, your kicks, batons, use of OC spray, less than lethal weaponry that doesn't require a hospitalization to compel a person to effect an arrest, things of that nature.
In your statistic of officer-involved shootings, what does that include?
The statistic that's
Does it include a shooting of a dog?
No.
Does it involve unintentional discharge?
No. For the purpose of this report, we categorize OIS hits and non-hits on human beings.
And what were the total?
The total number for this year, we've had 48 officer-involved shootings, 38 of which were hits.
Okay, so out of 1,500,000 contacts, you're saying that there were 48 officer-involved shootings?
Yes, Commissioner Soboroff, and that would be representative of that red toe graphic that we actually illustrated. But
I'm sorry.
It's very poignant. We did see a troubling increase with mental illness, although the numbers were relatively small. These are indicators that officers are being engaged in categorical use of forces where it's perceived that the persons under accounting with are mentally ill. 2014, we had 5 such incidents. 2015, it sharply increased to 15. So that's an increase that we're looking at. We recognized, and you'll see when I get into some of the training, some of the things we're doing in response to that. Perceived suicide by cops incidents in 2015. We also saw an increase there with 12. We've usually averaged about 4.8 in the prior 5 years, so that is another marked increase. So we draw a distinction between perceived mental illness and put suicide by cop in its own category. So we have 2 separate figures, but obviously they're closely related under the same subject. In 2015, incidents involving unarmed suspects. Well, we had 5. And then incidents involving officers' injuries during OIS incidents, we had 5 in 2014, and then we saw a sharp increase in 2015 with 14. Some other factoids that really jumped out in this review is that in response to what we believe in response to a lot of the training we're doing, we were glad to see an increased use in tasers. We saw a 24% increase in tasers. And to a lesser degree, although a bigger percentage point, a use of beanbag shotguns. Commissioner Johnson, I know you've remarked on this several occasions, and the one thing the department and this commission firmly agrees on: these use of less lethal tools can go a long way to mitigating those encounters with suspects armed with weapons other than firearms. They give us the opportunity to disable suspects without having to shoot them, in often cases, provided we use good, strong tactics. And the beanbag shotgun, when I say 31%, is a relatively smaller number, but that's one of the things that the department will strive to improve greater usage on in the future.
In the smaller communities with the body cameras, the use of force numbers have been affected, as have officer-related complaints have been affected. So it'll be interesting to see how, as we roll out the body cams, how these numbers are affected. Probably not so much in the next year, but in a couple of years.
Well, as these roll out, I can't imagine a annual use of force report from this point forward not having a robust discussion on the impact of body-worn cameras on the use of force. You can guarantee that will be a subject that will be covered in the future. And with the increase of less lethal, we saw a decrease in the number of the miscellaneous types of physical forces, the kicks, the punches, things of that nature. That's something we interpret as a good thing. Kicks, punches, those things tend to injure both the officers and the suspect, and through the use of other tools and using distance and communication, that's kind of a figure that we would expect. That's a figure we expect to see. We did see, for the first time over the course of the last several years, a decrease in the number of non-categorical use of forces. We hadn't seen a decrease for the last at least 4 or 5 years, and this past year we saw a reduction in about a number of 38 total non-CAT. So hopefully that's a sign of a trend that will continue in the future. Batons is also a type of device that isn't being used as much as it used to be, and we saw a decrease in 21% in the use of baton. Now, on the subject of training, we touched upon this a little bit. We talked about mental illness. What this report spends a great deal of time on is this department's training program, how our training program evolves to emerging trends to address what's going on in the community. Mental illness is obviously a perfect topic that illustrates exactly what the department is doing to address the increased encounters with the mentally ill. We have instituted a 40-hour mental health intervention training. By the end of this year, we expect to have 1,100 plus officers through that mental health intervention training. We also have 2-hour update classes for officers that have attended that mental health training to make sure that their skills and knowledge are updated as a result of attending that training. PSL, where we've got the academy. That's the academy graduates. Once they graduate, they come back to the academy in 11 months to kind of regroup and refine some of the trainings to dispel myths that they might have come across in the 11 months out in the field. These are all different things that this department does to try to address the emerging trends. Things on the horizon. OC spray is something we see that the officers just aren't using. It's an aerosol type spray. They spray somebody with OC spray, and everybody gets affected. It could and should be a valuable, less than lethal type of device that we should be able to use, but because of the effects of the aerosol, officers don't like it. We're looking at exploring a gel-based OC spray that will be a more narrow stream, that will be more conducive to preventing officers from getting impacted by the use of the aerosol effects of the OC spray. We're also looking at one of the things we discovered is the use of the beanbag shotgun. The beanbag shotgun, a very effective tool when dealing with suspects armed with weapons other than firearms. It gives us a standoff distance that officers don't have to allow the suspect to get too close to them. And what we're looking at now is possibly we're evaluating putting a 3-gun mount up in the front of the police vehicle. A lot of times when we're looking at, as you well know, some of these cases where the officers did not have a beanbag shotgun, it was because it was either locked and secured in the trunk, and they just didn't have ready access to it.
What about requiring officers to carry their tasers instead of having them leave them in the trunk?
In September, a notice was put out. It is now mandatory, effective September, that each uniformed officer deployed to the field shall be deployed with a taser.
You keep it on their person?
On their person.
Oh.
So we still have some cases that are in the hopper and queue that we can't quite hold them to that standard just yet, but come full circle, that notice in play, and officers are mandated to carry a taser, at least in uniform patrol. The statistical use of the regular beanbag shotgun is very minimal compared to the use of the beanbag shotgun. So, and that's.
And Commissioner, we've had that discussion, and they're just like mechanical issues with it. They're different configurations, so it might take some modification. But obviously, we've had that discussion. We want to make sure that we have both options available, so there's not an either or.
We didn't get too in depth in comparison with other major police departments in terms of their number of officer-involved shootings. Fully expect that the Inspector General is going to be doing a rather in-depth review of how this department compares with other agencies. And so what we did is just briefly touched upon the number of OISs and what really jumped out. And we have to keep in mind, comparing big city police departments with other big city police departments is a tough comparison to make. There's different size populations, different numbers of officers, different demographics. But for what it's worth, a lot of people always want to be able to draw that comparison to see what's going on in the other cities. And what was remarkable is if you were to look at this graph, you can see how close we resemble the Chicago Police Department in the number of officer-involved shootings over the last 5 years. This current year, Chicago had 49 officer-involved shootings, and we finished 2015 with 48. So, don't really, not too much to make out of it, other than it's a comparison with another big city.
It's a comparison to another big city, but certainly one we don't want to aspire to.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. So here's where we spent a little bit of time communicating to the public exactly what the use of force policy is. And in this case here, we draw a slide, and it's laid out in both the executive summary and in great detail the full report. But officers may only use that force which is objectively reasonable to defend themselves, defend others, and effect an arrest or detention, prevent escape, or overcome resistance. Objectively reasonable. How do you determine objectively reasonable? Well, I'll get into that a little bit. But the use of force policy is also distinguished by the use of deadly force policy, which kind of gets into a little bit more specifics on when officers can actually use deadly force. And officers are authorized to use deadly force when they experience the imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury, the chance of that to themselves, to prevent that same thing from happening to somebody else, or to prevent the escape of a fleeing felon who poses a significant threat or serious bodily injury to the public. Objectable reasonableness is a standard that's determined through a federal court case known as Graham versus Connor. We take a moment to explain to the public about that case and what objectable reasonableness and how that standard is ultimately viewed by this department, how it goes through, what we go through as a body when we're adjudicating these things, and we list a series of factors that it's not just objective reasonableness in terms of an officer with similar training and experience as the law states. There's other factors that always go into play in determining what is objectively reasonable. You take things into consideration like the seriousness of the offense, the type of weaponry or the type of threat that the officers are facing, the size of the officer versus the size of the suspect. I mean, there's a variety of factors that will go into play in determining what is objectively reasonable based on a similar Los Angeles police officers with similar training and experience is ultimately the standard as to what is determined what is in or out of policy. The department's policy in comparison to the law is more restrictive. There's commissioners, we don't go too often without finding a use of force to be an administrative disapproval. That administrative disapproval is an out-of-policy shooting that we've ultimately found to be the case. That does not necessarily mean it's going to result in a criminal filing. Frankly, it rarely results in a criminal filing. Our policy standards are more restrictive than Graham versus Connor, the way we interpret it. A couple different examples of how it's more restrictive is the use of fleeing felons. I cited the law about the shooting fleeing felons. Well, LAPD standard is you've got to exhaust a whole series of resources and alternatives before the shooting of that fleeing felon would be found to be in policy. Where by law, if it's a fleeing felon and he poses a risk, you're within the law. But by department standards, you will not. The commission in the past, just a couple years ago, integrated the Hayes decision, where we evaluate tactics. That is not part of the Graham decision. So when we evaluate tactics and find a use of force to be out of policy, there's another example of where the department's use of force policy is more restrictive than criminal law. Sometimes there's a lot of misunderstanding about that, but hopefully we spend some time explaining to the public the difference between an out of policy shooting and what is ultimately a
When you say restrictive, you mean tougher?
Tougher, yes.
Yeah, okay.
We already talked about the two types of force, the categorical and the non-categorical, and we covered the definition of that, and then that's non-categorical force to pretty much accomplish those three things: to compel, to overcome, or defend. And Force Investigation Division, tomorrow, the department is holding a media day to illustrate to the public just how in-depth and involved our Force Investigation Division investigations are. They're going to get a first-hand look. But this is a team of and we're the model for the country in terms of investigating officer-involved shootings.
I thought you actually did an excellent job of describing the process in the executive summary. I'm actually going to agendize that for a future meeting, largely for the benefit of the public to really understand the various levels of oversight and checks and balances that we have in our investigation, review, and adjudication of categorical uses of force.
And I have to briefly break it down a little bit for you, too, here.
Sure.
Can you back up one slide
Yes,
for
sir.
a second? Tomorrow, will the opportunity, or has the opportunity already happened, where those in attendance will be allowed to use a simulator and step in the shoes of an officer in a high-pressure situation? Is that happening tomorrow, or has that happened before?
That particular exercise of bringing the public to use different force option simulators is a tool that is available to all 21 commanding officers. Just about all of them, one time or another, take advantage of that, where they run different community members through. Ideally, people that question or some of our harshest critics, commanding officers are often encouraged to reach out to those folks to give them the opportunity to go through. But putting people through, although it's not, I don't believe it to be. It's a little bit out of my lane about the specifics of tomorrow, but I do not believe that particular exercise is part of tomorrow's
But it is
event.
available.
But it is something that's available, and we have a road show, if you will, where you have a mobile FOSS device that can go out into the community and be used, and it's used quite frequently.
Thank you, sir.
And we have put the media through the force option simulator in the past. Matter of fact, as recently as this past year, if I'm not mistaken. But tomorrow is more about, as John has said, tomorrow is more about the process and helping the media to understand the process, and then also because the media is our partner in this process. They are at the scene of officer-involved shootings, and this will help us to do each other's jobs. We're trying to get information to them, and we're trying to gather information for our investigation, and so this will also help for both of us to understand when we can make that transition.
When we're communicating to the public our investigation process, it never goes without saying that we incorporate, or the department, the city incorporates the role of the Inspector General. It doesn't get into detail exactly what the Inspector General's role does. This report spends some sufficient detail explaining the role and responsibilities, the oversight that's provided by the Inspector General, and we basically lay it out what the Inspector General does. We don't just say that they conduct an investigation. We actually lay out to them what the roles and responsibilities are of the Inspector General and how they provide that independent oversight of the Force Investigation Division investigation. We also explain to them that the DA's office has a role, that every time there's a categorical use of force incident, not only does FID roll out to the scene, not only does an Inspector General roll out to the scene, but also the LA County, a representative from the LA County District Attorney's Office rolls out to the scene to evaluate whether or not there's any criminality, and from time to time we'll offer some investigative advice, but they have an oversight role to make sure that that everything's on the up and up, and they give that third level of objective review when they roll out to these scenes. And Commissioner Johnson, here's where we break down a little bit in brief detail what that process is. Obviously, when there's an officer-involved shooting, we have the incident occurs. Force Investigation Division has a team of on-call specialized detectives 24/7 that they respond out to the scene, ideally within an hour. They conduct a preliminary investigation, gather witnesses, collect evidence, and have a pretty somewhat superficial idea about what occurred, and beyond a superficial idea of what occurred. And so we have a 72-hour brief that gives the chief of police a briefing of that incident within 72 hours to get an idea what exactly occurred, and also importantly, any significant training issues that came out of that particular incident that the department needs to act on. And we'll identify those training issues, and training will be conducted within 90 days to ensure those officers are given the training in short order without having to wait for the exhaustive, roughly about a year-long process of the categorical investigation to go through. And we call that the general training update. Ideally, within 140 days of a categorical use of force investigation occurring, we get the completed, in-depth, as you well know, sometimes thousands upon thousands of pages of documentation documenting exactly what happened with that categorical use of force investigation. That report is reviewed by Use of Force Review Division, and we ultimately organize and convene a use of force board comprised of 5 department staff officers that listen to the evidence of the case and evaluate the use of force on 3 particular incidents, 3 particular categories: the drawing and exhibiting of a weapon, the tactics that were involved, and ultimately the use of force. Those recommendations are taken as just that, as recommendations, and presented to the Chief of Police, who ultimately makes the initial recommendation to the Board of Police Commissioners as to whether or not use of force is at a policy. So this report gets into the nuts and bolts of what that process and review evolves, and it ultimately lets the community know that the ultimate decision whether use of force is at a policy or in policy is made by the Board of Police Commissioners.
Have we ever had a media opportunity to do a mock closed session where people could see exactly what happens up there? Maybe they could sit in the seats where the commission sits and see on a mock circumstance. It seems like closed session is this big secretive thing, but I mean the detail and what we go through. I think I don't know if has that ever happened, or is that possible to affect?
Well, tomorrow is a sign of things. Tomorrow's FID investigation. In my 27 years on, I am not aware of this department ever putting on an in-depth review for the media where they get to see a real-life situation simulation force investigation division. So if that's a sign of things to come, that's obviously something we can evaluate and see the value of putting on a mock review of that nature. The investigation, review, and adjudication process of the lesser type use of force, the non-CATs that I explained to you earlier. We get into the process involved in that. It's nowhere near the stringent investigative process that a categorical takes on. However, the public will be able to see that it's a multi-level review that ultimately starts with the supervisor, gets reviewed by the area commanding officer. That use of force is ultimately reviewed with recommendations made by the Bureau commanding officer, which ultimately comes to use of force review division for final classification of whether or not the use of force is in or out of policy. So that'll conclude my piece. I just want to turn it over to Officer Jens Bach and his partner Ryan Gonzalez that are going to cover the next 2 phases of this. And in all honesty, the 2 biggest contributors to this report. And I'm hoping you find their piece of this to be meaningful.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll be presenting on the OIS HIT piece, officer-involved shooting with HIT. So in 2015, we had 38 OIS HIT incidents, and this was an increase by 12 incidents compared to 2014. Sorry, just a moment.
That's good. That's good. Interesting.
If you can see, you can just go ahead and verbally good.
That's why I didn't use this stuff. It never works. That's right. It's so
Okay, sorry about that. Like as I said, we had 38 OS hit incidents in 2015, which was an increase by 12 incidents when you compare to 2014, and that was a 46% difference. 2015 also exceeded the annual average for the period of 2011 through 2014 by 4 incidents or 12%. Most of the department's OS hit incidents are as a result of either radio calls and also observation activities. Radio calls made up 50% of all of the OIS hits, and observation was second greatest with 32%.
That's kind of a trend. That's kind of a recurring trend that we noticed too when we're running the data. Those are certainly the two most significant types of sources for all OIS hit incidents.
The top line is the most recent year, is 2015?
Yes. No, it's not. It's the gray one on the bottom. Yes.
Which one is it?
The gray one on the bottom.
2011 is on the top, right? And then 2015 is on the bottom.
Yes, that's correct. Officers who were involved in the OIS hit incidents were assigned to various bureaus, and Metropolitan Division had 17 OIS hit incidents last year, and they saw a significant decrease and were involved in 2 in 2015. That was represented an 88% decrease for Metropolitan Division in terms of.
Jump in there, but that's a significant detail. You know, we've expanded Metro that started in April of last year, and I think culminated roughly about September of October with a massive influx of officers that are assigned to Metro. The year before, they had 17 officer-involved shootings in 2014. This year, a lot of times, I think a lot of folks would expect that number to increase, and we're happy to report that number has been reduced to 2. So that is a stark reduction in the number of officer-involved shootings from Metro.
And Central Bureau was the second largest, or had the second most OS hit incidents.
Yeah, we also the report also focused on analyzing officers who had more than one shooting in a 5-year period. So when we were looking at that data, we noticed that there were approximately 36 officers that were involved in more than one incident in the 5-year period. And of those 36, 33 were involved in only 2 shootings. And there were only 3 that were involved in more than in 3 shootings for that same period.
And did they have deployments that were
exactly correct? That's what we
pretty
noticed.
much the same. Were they in?
Well, we noticed
or Metro or wherever.
We noticed personnel assigned to CTSOB, Counterterrorism, Terrorism Special Operations Bureau. They consisted of the largest representation of those 36 officers.
Okay.
Which is Metro.
Yeah.
And the next part is the number of officers firing per incident. In 2015, a vast majority of the OS hit incidents involved only one officer firing his or her weapon, and that was in 24 out of 38 incidents, which was 63%. The second largest was the 2 officers firing, with 8 out of 38 or 21%. And the remaining, or the third largest, was with 3 officers firing per incident with 11%. And there were no significant, this was pretty much consistent with previous years, so there was no trends noted on this part.
What we were looking at when we were running this data basically was just to tell us, we wanted a comparison, we wanted to look to see of all the shootings, what are we looking at in terms of the number of officers firing? Which also kind of will be discussed a little more broader in the hit ratio, the number of rounds that were fired, which is included in the full report.
And I would just like to correct myself. It was actually a significant increase in 2015 from 2014 in the incident that involved one officer firing.
Which is important in terms of the command and control at the situation.
Yeah, that's correct.
And training.
And reflective of training.
You know, one of the things that is less obvious to John and his group because they're relatively new at their jobs, but in 2011, which was our highest year since I've been chief for officer-involved shootings, we were very concerned, and actually we did a report similar to this that was not as in-depth as this, but similar to this in 2012. And then one of the things we were concerned about is too many shooters and too many rounds. And so we took, we changed training. We brought our supervisors in. We made sure that, that supervisors understand their role in a shooting is, not a last resort for them to be one of the shooters. And so one of the reasons we were so desirous of doing this report is to see, in another year or another outlier year with a lot of officer-involved shootings, what were we seeing? And so I think when John comments on number of shooters and number of rounds, hopefully you'll see the impact of some of the things that the department did in between 11 and 15, which is a pretty short amount of time, in an organization's history, but a significant difference.
And the training the chief mentioned also shows on the average number of rounds per incident. It's been a downward trend since 2012, with 2015 being the lowest year so far in a 4-year period. And in 2015, there were an average of 6 rounds fired by officers per incident.
And this is a question that's not on a particular slide, but it's a question related to the presentation of the information. So we've broken it in the executive summary, OIS hits and OIS non-hits. In the full report, is there an aggregate number? Because frankly, I'm much more interested in when officers are firing, whether they actually hit the suspect or not, as much less relevant to me. Obviously, that does have downstream implications, but whether they hit somebody or not is not that relevant to this analysis, at least for me, from the bigger picture. So in the broader report, is the aggregate is all this information included in aggregate numbers?
The big report follows the same format as executive summary.
So I would actually like these same slides, but it shouldn't be that difficult because you have all the information. It's just a matter of combining the two numbers. But I would like all this information in the aggregate of all officer-involved shootings.
Yes, sir. We'll take care of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Johnson, we're putting this together. One of the things, we looked at prior reports, other departments, and this separating OIS hits and OIS non-hits was a formula that we fell into.
Yeah.
Your point is well taken. And
I also get that you guys did an incredible amount of work in a short period of time. I don't expect perfection this time. There will probably be other pieces of information that we will want based on questions we have based on this, and hopefully this will be a somewhat of an iterative process, and every year it will get better and better. But this is one piece of information that I think would be very useful in the short term. So if we could get that as a supplement to this, that would be very helpful.
That's the we included, so no hit is included in the full report. We do look at all the same specific.
No, I know, but we don't have an aggregate number.
Sir, correct.
So
there is no aggregate.
if there was an incident where the suspect was hit and 3 officers fired, and there was another incident where the suspect wasn't hit and 3 officers were fired, I mean that's what we want to. Those are the trends we want to look at. Yes, we want to look at, and that is relevant to every piece of information, that the ethnicity of the suspects involved, whether the suspect was armed with a gun or a knife or no weapon. It's really any time an officer has drawn his gun and fired his weapon, that's the information. Where they actually hit the suspect, I mean, that really goes to where the officers aim in a particular situation, which is not really what we're trying to get at with this information.
And they all hits and non-hits all do come to the commission for adjudication.
Absolutely.
Okay.
the probative value of separating a hit and no hit is probably at best dubious, and your point is well taken. If we had a do-over, we would have probably just did an aggregate study. And
Although
at this point forward,
I agree completely with Commissioner Johnson, but I do think it's valuable. I mean, I think it's important that we see the aggregate numbers. I also think it's valuable to see the separate numbers. So I wouldn't, given that you have put it together, Chief Beck talked about when we went through this a few years ago, and one of the issues there was ratio of hits and non-hits and how many people were firing. And so I don't think there's any criticism coming to you. It's just we're looking at some different issues. It'll help us to see the aggregate, but I also think it's really helpful to see them split as well. So I think it's great. Thank you.
We'll have it all.
Okay, thank you.
And to follow up on the number of rounds was the lowest, or definitely decreased a lot. And the number of hits has also increased with of those rounds fired. So the hit ratio for 2015 was 38, but that's based on temporary numbers pending the coroner's report on a few of the cases. For suspects' ethnicity involved in officer-involved shootings for the hit incidents, Hispanics represented the largest group with 22 out of 38, which was 58%. And the second largest was black suspects with 8 suspects out of 38, or 21%. And whites, there were 5 white suspects, or 13%, and Asian other had 3 suspects with 5%.
So the important thing that I noticed in this, in looking at these figures, is the number of. Well, I actually looked at the aggregate number. I tried to put the math together, but in terms of use of force, officer-involved shootings. Involving Hispanic suspects, it pretty much mirrored the population. For black suspects, it was about 2.5 times their percentage of the population. And for white and Asian, Filipino, and other, they were under their representation in the population. Is that my analysis correct?
Yes, Commissioner, it is. Let me jump in real quick, Jen, if you don't mind. That number is an overrepresentation of the residential population. We've looked at other factors. The larger report gets into some detail about socioeconomic factors, income factors, opportunity factors. But that's not the only area where that overrepresentation number occurs. So one of the things that I took the opportunity to look at is the homicide report, and we see similar type numbers reflective in the homicide report in terms of ethnicities of African Americans being disproportionately overrepresented in the victims of homicides, identified suspects in violent crimes, identified victims in violent crimes. For example, citywide homicides, victim descent is represented by 42% African Americans. Citywide homicides, suspect arrested by descent, 39% that figure represented African Americans. So that's not the only.
Victims were 42%, you said?
Yes, sir.
And suspects were suspects arrested. Was that suspects arrested or suspects?
Suspects arrested by descent, 39%. So it's one of those things that we looked at a variety of different areas, and it hopefully puts it in some context of what that figure represents. But hopefully that provides some sort of a backdrop as to why that number is the way it is. Obviously, that number being at the lower than the overall crime figures, that may be perceived as a good thing. But this department won't rest until we get that number to 0. That's the only good number that we would be acceptable to us.
And in terms of suspect age, we broke up these suspects in the OIS incidents into age groups just to take a look at who's actually involved. And somewhat surprisingly, the category with suspects between the ages 30 and 39 had a significant increase and was actually the largest group out of all of them, representing 53% of all the OIS hit incidents. And this was a 400% increase when we compared to 2014. Which had 4 suspects in the same group. And it could be as a result of people exiting the prison system, and also an increase in narcotics use or mental illness and whatnot.
Yeah. This was probably the most surprising thing I saw in the report.
So the bubble moved up. In other words, it used to be a younger. What's the next category down?
18 to 29.
So,
comparable category is.
And so the bubble moved up. So these are people that are coming out of prison.
Exactly. Yeah, that's our understanding, and it was very surprising data to.
We don't comment on it in the report, but some of the theories that are out there, and you do some of the research, that this is, that age range is where some types of mental illness has its onset at that later age. Drug use sometimes will take its effect over time, where it may not be prevalent in an 18 to 27-year-old, but starts to take its toll out on somebody in and out of jail, and those are some theories that have been floated out there, but they're theories that we did not get into in this report, but it's maybe worth further evaluation in the future.
Yeah, I just want to comment that theory, at least intuitively, I think makes more sense than the prison correlation.
I don't know. Schizophrenia is a much younger.
That's listed here, 18 to 23 versus 30 to 39.
I don't know. I'm really interested in that.
The one thing the thing that I think is most striking about this report is that it mirrors other issues that we're aware of. So last year when we did the homicide report, you remember that the age of homicide victims in the city of Los Angeles increased dramatically. In other words, we went, instead of having a younger demographic of victims, our victim demographic moved up. When the district attorney...
Victims or suspects?
Victims.
Victims of
homicide victims.
Okay.
So we also have seen in almost every one of the measurable categories an increase in police interaction with the mentally ill, whether it's dependency court or whether it's radio calls or whether it's our issues with homelessness on the streets of Los Angeles. We've seen an increase in contacts with the mentally ill and an increase in its presence on the street. So, when the reason I bring this up is because I think that this report and officer-involved shootings and police officer use of force have to be viewed always in the context of what's going on in society. And this is not a causal factor. This is a reaction to what happens in the reality of the world that these young officers deal with.
A good example of that, and I hate to go back so long, but it's in the mid 1990s, 1996, for example, our officer-involved shootings were in the 80s range, and that's when violent crime was far higher than it is today. But I think that's an excellent example of what the chief is trying to point out. Our use of force does seem to mirror what's going on in society.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of deceased suspects that were involved in OAS hit incidents, we broke that down by ethnicity as well. And for the deceased suspects, 3 were Hispanic. I'm sorry, just a moment.
And this can be viewed. This is in the infographic page at the beginning of the report, the top right portion.
12.
Okay, so out of the deceased suspects, 12 decedents were Hispanic, which was 57%, and that was an increase by 6 individuals from 2014, or 100%. And it was also a 20% increase when you compare to 2011 through 2014 annual average. The second largest ethnic groups were black and white suspects, which both had 4 individuals, which were 19% each. And for suspect weapons, there were a total of 38 suspects, and 13 of those, so 34%, were armed with a firearm. 10 suspects, or 26%, were armed with edged weapons, and 5 suspects, or 13%, were armed with a replica or a pellet gun. And the remaining were unarmed suspects. And unarmed, in terms of this report, includes physical force, a perception shooting where the officer believed that they saw a firearm, or it could have been simply no weapon at all.
So in 21 of the officer-involved shootings, there was no firearm or replica firearm, correct?
No, it was For replica or pellet gun, we had 5, so it was 13%.
Now, I'm not talking about percentage, raw numbers.
Raw numbers.
48. There were 48 officer-involved shootings. Right?
Yes, but this is just OAS hit, so it's out of 38.
Okay.
So,
let's
let's
combine it again. This is like a distinction without a difference.
Yeah, we're going back to the issue that you pointed out. Yeah.
Combining the two, there were. If you pull up your slide with the hits and no hits, there were 48 officer-involved shootings, and in 21 of those instances, there was no gun or replica gun involved.
No, those numbers are not included in here. This is simply OAS.
We can do that. We can. It's just adding two numbers.
Yeah,
together.
we'll add it together. Just
that,
add
okay?
no hits and.
So I have the total numbers here. In 53% of the incidents of all officer-involved shootings, suspect either had a firearm or an imitation firearm. In 21% of the incidents, the suspect either had a knife or another edged weapon. And 4% of the incidents, suspect had a blunt force weapon, such as a baseball bat.
Okay. So in those 43% where there was no gun or replica gun, do you have a breakdown of the ethnicity of the suspect?
Well, I just want to point out there are no deceased suspects for the no-hit incidents. So
I'm talking about officer-involved shootings.
Oh, overall?
Overall.
Okay.
If you don't have it today, that's fine. I would like a breakdown of the ethnicity of the suspect by weapon.
Okay, we'll put that together. We don't have that with us today.
And Commissioner, given the fact that we've separated the hits and no hits and done similar analysis, I'll split out. As far as aggregate, those are things that we'll come back to and give you updates.
Okay. In the executive summary, I don't know if it was in the long report. In the executive summary, it did not include the ethnic breakdown of suspects in this analysis. I wasn't sure if it was in the long report or not.
Yes,
but
sir,
if it's it is okay.
Yes, sir. Yeah, the ethnic breakdown of deceased suspects is in the full report.
I'm not just talking about deceased. I'm talking about deceased and any officer involved shooting.
Right.
By weapon.
By weapon.
By weapon, right.
We can talk about it afterwards, and I can be clearer with you about what I'm looking for.
Okay. And returning to the indication of mental illness, there was a sharp increase of suspects that were perceived to have an indication of mental illness in 2015, and there was a total of 14 suspects compared to 5 in 2014. So there was an 180% increase. And for under the influence only looks at suspects from OAS hit that were deceased and also from the in-custody death categories because those are the only ones that are toxicology reports available.
And only about half of those, because, correct?
Correct, yes, that's correct.
Because I think it's important to recognize, because I even saw some reporting that talks about, what's the number, 12?
Yes.
12, the 12 under the influence of the 21 deceased. But remember, the other toxins aren't done yet because, and you see the reports just as I do.
Yeah.
And methamphetamine intoxication plays a huge role in officer-involved shootings.
Yeah.
So,
I think this is a huge understatement.
We'll be able to answer that better.
Yeah, I think this is a huge understatement of how many officer-involved shootings involve people under the influence.
Particularly methamphetamine.
Correct. Yes.
And unfortunately, we only get that back when the suspect dies.
Right.
Okay, I'll be discussing OAS no hits. In 2015, there were 10 OAS no hit incidents, which was a 150% increase from last year. And also, the 2015 total of 10 exceeded the 11 through 14 annual average by less than one incident, or 3%. Looking from the officer's unit of assignment, the majority of officers involved in no-hit incidents were assigned to a specialized assignment. They represented 7 out of 10 officers. 7 out of 10 incidents, which is 70%. And then also, officers assigned to patrol were the second highest count. They had 4 officers, or 29%. Officers assigned to Metropolitan Division represented 2 officers, or 14%. Looking at number of officers firing per incident, in 2015, most of the no-hit incidents involved only 1 officer firing, which was also consistent with OIS hit incidents. In this regard, 7 out of 10 incidents, or 70%, fell under that category. Incidents with only 2 officers firing was the second largest category, with 2 out of 10 incidents, or 20%. And there was 1 incident in which 3 officers fired, which comprised of 10%. Also on this slide, number of rounds that were fired per incident. Most of the rounds that were fired were only in the 1 to 5 range, which was also consistent with OIS hits incidents. This slide represents the ethnic breakdown of involved suspects. 4 suspects, or 40%, were involved in no-hit incidents. They comprise of the largest category. Then also looking at suspect age, the 18 to 23 age group represented the largest group, which was 33% of the total.
As far as in custody death, we had a total of 12 in custody deaths last year, and this was an increase from there was a 200% increase from 2014, and it also exceeded the 4-year annual, which was 5.25 incidents per year. So it's 120% above that. Force was used in 3 of the in-custody deaths. And I just want to point out that there is a discrepancy between the executive summary and the main report, because additional information was received after the executive summary had been printed, that one of the case number 1 was reclassified, or was classified as a homicide. The coroner said there was a combination between narcotics use, pre-existing medical conditions, and the use of a taser by department personnel, but it was classified as a homicide due to that none of the factors could be singled out as a cause of death.
Yeah, and so let me jump in real quick on that one. And that one is a bit of a mystery. This was a case some of you may recall where the taser was used. There was some mental illness involved, post-traumatic stress disorder that was claimed by the family. The suspect was rolling around in glass. The coroner, when doing the autopsy, admitted to not identifying any puncture wounds at all from the taser. But then he lumped in the taser as being a contributing cause of death, and ultimately ruled it to be a homicide. But that kind of left us scratching our head a little bit as to how he came to that conclusion, when there's no evidence that the taser probes actually penetrated the skin in this particular case. But that one was noteworthy, and at least hopefully provides some explanation to the homicide classification that we have a question mark about.
But nonetheless, we included that update in the full report to make sure it's correctly stated there. For the other 2 forces where use was forced, one was where a handcuffed suspect fell to the ground, and the officer fell on top of him while holding on to the suspect. So that was considered a use of force. And the third one was a hit-and-run traffic collision in Harbor Division. There was miscellaneous non-lethal force involved in that, and the suspects appeared to be in medical distress in the backseat of the police vehicle. Officers attempted CPR, and fire department personnel transported to a hospital where the suspect later died. For the under the influence, 6 of the suspects were under the influence of either cocaine and or methamphetamine. 6 cases are pending toxicology from the coroner's office, and out of those 3, either it was involved narcotics arrest, or the fire department was under the opinion that they were under the influence, but that's not official yet until the coroner's toxicology report returns.
Jumping on to non-categorical use of force. 2015, as Captain McMahon stated earlier, there are 1,825 non-categorical use of force incidents, which was a decrease of 38 incidents from last year. That was a 2% reduction. When taking a look at the force applied in non-categorical use of force incidents, 82% of all incidents officers used firm grips and joint locks. And that was the largest percentage across the board when looking at force options.
95%.
Taser use increased by 6 percentage points compared to 2014, and in the 5-year period from 11 to 15, taser use at 28% was the highest percentage calculation. Also, beanbag shotgun use, as Captain McMahon stated earlier, 4% was the highest in the 5-year period.
And these statistics are the number of incidents in which these force options were used. So there could be multiple force options, so that they would appear under multiple categories.
And just a note that the taser, this was before tasers were required to be on body for every officer.
That's correct.
So they either had to have them or go get them.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not a full
will
year.
Probably go up.
Correct. Yeah, it's not a full year where that policy had been in effect. That's correct, sir.
And as Captain McMahon stated earlier, we're looking. The department's looking into to researching additional force options, including the gel-based OC spray, a 40 millimeter less lethal ammunition.
What's that? What's a 40 millimeter one?
Currently, we you want to jump in on this?
The beanbag shotgun round. I can. Probably every time that photo goes up in commission, sometimes there's always a noticeable gasp from the injury, the graphic nature of the injury. Although the injury is more often not that serious, the graphic nature of it appears to be worse than it is. The 40 millimeter is a foam rubber, a rubber type projectile that can be used at a greater distance. And one of the things we're looking at to see if this particular type of tool could be more beneficial in terms of dealing with our suspects with knives, bats, sticks, weapons other than firearms, give us greater standoff distance, because it can be argued that the 40 millimeter has a greater stopping power and less likelihood for those types of injuries you see sometimes in commission. And so we're taking a look at that to see the feasibility of whether or not that's a good tool to look at, to go to.
And we currently use it, just not in a patrol application.
Looking at the ethnic breakdown for all suspects involved in non-categorical use of force incidents, Hispanics represented the largest category with 870, and out of the 1,894 suspects, and that was 46% of the population.
It was what percentage?
That was 46. That comprised of 46%.
So roughly corresponding to their percentage of the population of the city.
Correct, yes, sir. Blacks represented 34%. Their figures were 652 out of the 1,894.
So about 3.5 times their 10% of the population, 35% of the non-cats.
We'd have to look at the figures, but seems on point. That's about right, sir. Whites comprised of 278 individuals, which was 15%. And then the remaining ethnic categories all comprised of about 5%, with the remaining 94 individuals. For homeless, we wanted to take a look at homelessness. And these figures are only based on officers' observations or statements made by suspects about their resident status. In those cases, 427 were identified as being homeless. And we did the same thing. Also, let me go back to that slide. We did the same thing for mental illness, which were also based on officers' observations or statements made by suspects. In those cases, 455 out of the 1894 were perceived to be mentally ill.
important correlation is we see the same trends in terms of our non-cats as playing out as we do in terms of our categoricals on these two issues. This report, as lengthy as it is, we do have copies available, but we're also posting it for the public on the department's land. Both the executive summary and the full report, I believe, are, if they're not available right now as we speak, they should be by sometime this afternoon. And both reports are available on lapdonline.org for further examination.
Thank you very much. Questions? Questions?
No analytic questions right now because I want to wait for to review more thoroughly. But I want to thank you. I really look forward to reviewing more carefully the findings here and having more discussion. Thank you so much.
I don't have questions at this point, but I have a few comments. I would like to commend the chief and the department for both the quality of the report, speed that you were able to put it together, and also the underlying substantive improvements that the report is telling us seem to be happening. With respect to the report itself, not only was it extraordinarily comprehensive and done quickly, as you've noted, just want to remind my colleagues and the public, these are 2015 data we're looking at. 2015 only ended 2 months ago. And I may be mistaken, but I seem to recall that the New York report, which took, I believe, 9 months to put together, has 2012 or 2013 data in it. And given how the situations have changed, given the public focus on what's happening today in police departments, I think it's really important to acknowledge and appreciate it. This is current data, and as a result, very valuable and very helpful. With respect to the substance of the department's actions that are reported in the report, two things seem to me to be particularly important and valuable. One is something which we've been talking about a little bit today that Commissioner Johnson has helped pull out, is the ability we can see of the disparate impact some of these activities have with respect to ethnicity and race. And the more data we can get our hands on in those areas, the better, because that's clearly one of the most significant concerns we have and people generally have. And the more we can understand better what's exactly happening, I think the better we can respond to it. And I commend you for helping us do that. The second is I'm particularly impressed with the, I guess what I would call the relative nimbleness of the department over this period. The strategic moves the department has made and is making to address what's actually happening on the street, on patrol. Mental health, the increase in the mental health issues, the homelessness problems, the effects of drug and alcohol, and the recognition of that, and the department's responses both in adapting training, but also stepping back, looking at equipment, looking at how our equipment's used, how the officers have access to the equipment, all of which I believe is so significantly important in the overall effort toward de-escalation. And to see this training happening already in the academy, happening already in service, and to see the preliminary indications that we're making some progress, I just think is very impressive. It's very important. I've been on the commission now almost 9 years, and I think that this presentation and what it represents is probably among the 2 or 3 most important presentations I have been part of on this commission. And I just want to thank you for it and thank the chief, thank everyone in the department, thank Commissioner Johnson for pushing this forward so aggressively, because I think it's extremely important. I thank you for it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. Hopefully, everybody will realize this demonstrates our commitment to the reverence for human life, and that's really what this is all about.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
At the end of the day, it's what's next year is going to look like. And the way you affect next year's is to see what this year's is. And you have, in real time, really, given us what this year's is. But the responsibility to affect next year's is that of all of us, and this gives us a real good beginning.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Figueroa, anything to add?
Just as I read this and go through this, who do I call to clarify the data and the questions as I'm going through?
Commissioner, you can call me. You can call anyone
else.
Call anybody you want, Commissioner.
Okay.
Try 911.
In fact, Commissioner, I'll reach out to you just to check to see what you got, and we'll follow up. You got it.
Again, I want to just thank you for and don't take my questions as criticism. They weren't really meant as criticism at all. They're just some further clarifications. I was extraordinarily impressed as I was going through the executive summary. I obviously have not had a chance to read the longer report yet. I will dig into it probably this weekend. And again, we will be bringing this back for further discussion in the future. And I know how hard you guys worked on it. It was really, really appreciated, and we all thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you for those comments, President.
Thank you, sir. And we do have
action on this item.
We do have 4 public comment cards on this
Okay,
item.
let's call the comments, please.
We have Prentice Jenkins, Ted Hayes, Yvonne Michelle Autry, and Matthew Preston Schubert.
Prentice Jenkins, published a City Life newsletter, activist since 1991. I'd like everybody to take a look at the face of use of force. So that man's name is Ezell Ford. He's dead because of use of force. This was a black man walking down the street, minding his own business, when 2 psychologically unstable cops decided, I wonder if the stereotype is true about him. Let's go fill him up, see what happens. And he fought back, and they murdered him and covered up the sexual assault. So you're discussing mental illness, but you won't discuss the mental illness in the police department. No one wants to discuss that. Psychologically unstable cops feeling black men up just to see if the stereotype is true. You know, there's no reason for a cop to ever go touch a man. I'm sitting right here. Cops, excuse me, to touch you? There's no reason to touch me. Just say excuse me and walk by. Only gay cops will do that. Only a gay cop will start touching on you, hit you on the arm. If I hit the chief's wife, did her like that on the arm, guess what that would be? That would be a sexual assault. You know why? Because I don't know the chief's wife. Why would you go start touching on her? There's no reason for a cop to touch anyone. Do you understand? You see how you all reacted to that? No one reacted when a cop touches you on your arm. There's no reason for a cop to go touching suspects. If you go talk to a suspect, just
You're
talk
off
to him.
topic, sir. Will you get on topic or give up the rest of your time?
Sir, that is topic.
Okay,
The
it's not
topic is they were talking about mental illness, weren't they?
I'm telling you, it's not on topic.
Sir, were they talking about mental? You
so
interrupted.
next speaker,
Give me
please.
I want 10
Ted
more
Hayes.
seconds. You interrupted me.
Next speaker, please.
You interrupted me.
Next speaker,
I
please.
want my 10 more seconds. Sir, you interrupted me. I want my 10 more seconds. I was talking about what they were talking
now
about.
to sit down.
Sir, you owe me 10 more seconds.
I'm going to ask you to sit down.
But you owe me 10 more seconds.
This is
You
your last
interrupted
warning.
me. I didn't interrupt you.
This is your last warning to sit down.
You interrupted me. I want my 10 more seconds. Put my 10 more seconds on there. I can speak for 10 more seconds.
I'd like you to leave the.
Seconds. Why don't you sit down?
No.
I'd like you to leave.
Hey, y'all just can't bully the public, man.
Okay,
You
so
can't bully
I'll
the
ask you to
public
leave
outta
the
here.
meeting now, sir.
You can't bully the public out of here. You owe me 10 more seconds. You don't like what I said, and you can't stop me from criticizing you.
Officers, will you please ask this gentleman?
Are you throwing me out of here again?
Yes, sir.
I'll file another case again.
Okay.
Mr. Ted Hayes.
This is a bamboozled document. Several shades of gray and several shades of blue. This is a full-color document. On this page, you have a police car shut up with a green windshield, red lights, and black tires. There's no red, green, or black in any graph or diagram you have. So you don't really recognize any contrast in the various things that you show. Who would, you complained about the fact that brought this thing in without giving you adequate time to review it. I saw one commissioner chastise a group of officers who gave out statistics was absolutely deplorable because it was not convincing and not believable. So I don't think they have very much respect for this commission. I really don't. Otherwise, and they don't have respect for the public also. Otherwise, they would not have graphs in shades of blue and shades of gray. No red, no green, and certainly no black. So I can't really interpret this, particularly with the circular graphs, because I have to keep looking back and say, does this match with this? Does this match with that? Because they don't intend for you to see something coherently and decisively. This is a bamboozled document. You wouldn't find anybody who makes documents who would not utilize a full color graph at all. But this is not full color for a specific reason. This is what the LAPD does. They do it to you, and they do it to the public. You didn't get adequate time, and we had none of these in the back. None of them. First time I saw it when you first saw it. No, perhaps later.
Next speaker,
Yvonne
please.
Michelle Autry.
Yes, what I'd like to say is, you compile these statistics, just like I'm sure you don't include in your analysis the number of complaints that you have stated as unfounded. So I don't believe this. I can look on even the internet, and even though this is 2016, it says police killed more Americans in 2014 than in all U.S. mass shootings. So, I don't believe this is designed to make you look like you are somehow, serving the community. While there are some that serve and protect, that's it firstly. This is one example, again, uses of excessive force. I'd also like to use this opportunity to bring light that Treshawn Carey has been falsely accused.
Off topic?
No, because it's involved in a use of excessive force, even though you did not determine or deem that it was a use of excessive force. As members of the Black community, we're used to that. She's a witness, and so she has been arrested for grabbing a baton. So we're going to expose that. And then on a personal matter, how many instances, again, has the evidence been altered? In 1996, when I was at a 24-hour fitness center, police responded to the scene of fabricated or the scene where there was no crime. A white woman had accused me of rolling around in towels. Yeah, just like Prentice reveals, white men have fantasies with black men, and so many white women have these special exotic sex fantasies. There was no crime committed, and because of that, I spent 7 days in a mental hospital for something I never did, injected with Risperdal, Cogentin, and Haldol. So again, I don't believe your statistics, and we're going to continue to show until you stop the police brutality and that you prosecute those police officers who are committing crimes in cold blood. We know it.
Thank you for your comments.
400 years of oppression and extermination by your licensed LAPD murderers, and that's what they are.
The final speaker on this item, Matthew Preston Schubert.
Good afternoon.
All right, good afternoon. I have 4 points to reveal after being involved in excessive force that would help you guys develop a better opinion and be an add-on to the group that has explained in detail, as you have stated, about excessive force. The following 4 points are: LAPD employees not securing the suspect or victim completely, which could be the reason for in and out of jail use of force. Point number 2, LAPD employees not securing the scene of use of force fully, which is a reason for others being a part in action of the use of force. Point number 3, the Department of Mental Health being only a temporary answer about the victim/suspect reporting misuse of force due to the lack of care to fully secure the scene where force is used by LAPD employees, which could be a reason for many unfiled yet on the way civil claims and suits. So please be aware of that. Point number 4, developed witnesses who are not communicating fully with police about suspect victim and use of force by LAPD, which could be the reason for FBI and other agencies being secretly involved in this operation. I am very proud to announce this revealing information after being in pursuit. My ETA, estimated at time arrival, is steady. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And there are no other comment cards on this item, sir.
Again, thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
We're now on item number 5, public comment. We have 8 comment cards. The first 4, Prentice Jenkins, Matthew Preston Schubert, the Red Chief Hunt, and Aaron Schwartzbart. Mr. Schubert.
Good afternoon again. My name is Matthew Preston Schubert. My general comment is about my filed application with the LAPD for special operations, vice undercover, or just special operations training. I am proud to announce that I do support the police and I do support the community, and I definitely appreciate what opportunities I'm given by the community and by the police. I am continuously in pursuit of resolving background matters before I pursue and proceed with my application. And I want to let you guys know that I am on your side just as much as I am on the community side, and tolerating and investigating any waste and helping support my references for my application. That's kind of a lot of information in a nutshell, but eventually I'll get there, and I am willing to proceed regardless of my age, regardless of any reports filed against me. I am confident that those will iron out. So please keep me in mind when I come to make a general comment, or when I come to eventually elaborate on further issues like I have today about use of force. Thank you very much, and I am proud to be here today, and I'm proud to continue being alive and, being able to support a continuous issue that's been continuous. Thank you.
The Red Chief Hunt.
Getting ready to tell you how they really feel about us, Matt. Went over to the city attorney's office and tried to handle a case out. They said, "Get out of here, you goddamn nigger." I just couldn't believe that. They said, "Nigger, we don't want to settle out with you. We sent Matt Johnson home. We'd rather pay attorney fees. Cotton picking nigger, get out of here. This is just what the city think. These goddamn niggers, want some more money? We not gonna get those goddamn niggers shit. This is just what they think. You see, if you act like them, you might be like them. But the 5 white boys that's running this Los Angeles, they don't like no goddamn niggers. You can call what's the name? Call Mark Perry. He don't even want a nigga to work. That's just like the Oscars. They don't want no black niggas to have no Oscar. It's becoming a tradition. All these 5 white boys, they hate them goddamn niggers. I hate to say it. Niggas go to the back of the bus. They don't even want to say nothing. No, they wrong, but them niggers go to the back of the bus. I hate to say it, man. We in trouble. This is why I always play fuck the police. We in trouble. Police raping, killing, stealing. What more they got to do? Goddamn niggers. They don't want them goddamn niggers to work. Tell that nigga that at Venice Beach, nigga, you can't work. You go to the 9th Circuit and you still can't work. Get that nigger out of here. Fuck the police.
Aaron Schwartzbart, followed by Susan Rocha, Yvonne Michelle Autry, Ted Hayes, and Bill Watkins.
I'm Aaron Schwartzbart, driver of Motor Gospel Ministries John 3:16 race car. I felt compelled to talk about street racing in light of the recent rash of street racing related fatalities. I left the space program after 28 years as a rocket scientist to devote full time to the charity that I founded that works in cooperation with the Los Angeles Police Department to address community issues such as drugs, gangs, and illegal street racing. In my 28 years in the space program, I honed my ability to make decisions off of data more than off of emotions, and I actually have some data that I think gives us some authentic reason for optimism despite the recent rash of street racing related fatalities that I wanted to share with y'all. Last June, as some of you may recall, we held a racers panel discussion at Mission Community Police Station in cooperation with Captain Todd Chamberlain, and we did something a little unusual. Those of us that are motorsports professionals invited the illegal street racers to come to the table for a summit and share their point of view with us without in any way condoning their irresponsible behavior. We listened attentively and we took careful notes. And while I don't have anything official to announce, we have been working behind the scenes on a three-pronged approach that's very responsive to the concerns voiced by the illegal street racers. It doesn't require reinvention of the wheel. Some of the startling data that came out of that racers panel discussion is that there are 15 legal sanctioned motorsports events per month within 2 hours of Los Angeles every month from March through October. While it would be wonderful to have new racetracks popping up everywhere, we don't need that to mitigate maybe 75% of the street racing related fatalities. We're working in these efforts to entice the illegal street racers to partake of these 15 legal events per month with a repeat offender letter and with several other things that you'll be hearing about soon. Thank you so kindly. Keep up the great work.
Thank you for the work you're doing in this space, and thank you for coming here today and bringing that to our attention.
Yvonne Michelle Autry.
I think that the award Sunday truly exposes the fact that the Zionist Jewish people, Mormons, some of the mafias, I think you want an all-white world. Maybe then you think that you'll survive this in time. That's not true. It's racism. I'd also like to take this opportunity to expose, last week Tut talked about Jeffrey Dahmer. I thought that was really very interesting. That was an incident of not only a white male who was cannibalizing, yes, eating people, raping Filipino and black men, and the police covered it up. The police covered this up. So this white male who was consuming people and raping, molesting, and one of them that ran away, the police didn't expose that. So I live downtown. When I speak about sex offenses and sex trafficking, and I thank God for Prentice who talks about the sick fantasies, that white people have. We're labeled as the troublemakers, but these horrible, sick experiments perpetrated on the TIs persist today. People illegally entering our rooms, people following us, seeking to persecute and use black women as the sacrificial lambs or the energy sources in your ritual. And again, your DNA kits were not fully resolved. I wonder why, how many black ops, special ops, undercover, off-duty police officers would have been implicated in that ritual, and how many black women are continually stalked, raped, and murdered, and it's justified while we're labeled as prostitutes, crazy, bipolar, manic depressive, schizophrenic, psychotic, paranoid, and delusional, or dysfunctional. I'm one example that lived to tell. And I saw, yes, thank you.
Ted Hayes.
Suspect arrested means very little because many instances when you're taken before the sergeant at the station, he will simply tell you to leave. Not only that, when you're arrested, scheduled for arraignment, their city attorneys have rejects, and the DA has a reject also. But that is what you have to consider when it comes to all these arrests. How many of them turn out to be nothing at all? Now, last week, a gentleman approached me and told me that indeed the district attorney's office, Jackie Lacey, does send a rollout on officers involved shootings. You never mentioned that. No one ever says who has control of the scene when the DA's there and the police are there. Because Jackie Lacey says the police don't know how to determine whether or not there's been a crime. Only we do. And for that reason, although the chief may refer an officer for criminal prosecution, we won't do it because the chief doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know what the elements of a crime happen to be. So let's make it clear. Who has control of an officer-involved shooting? Is it the district attorney or is it the LAPD? Who makes the concession? Now, I'm going to make the inquiry, if I can, with the DA to see what she has to say. She doesn't like to talk to people that the public shouldn't have to, so she doesn't do it at all. But the important thing is that being arrested means nothing. Once a person is arrested and the sergeant says, leave, that's a detention. But guess what the law has to say about a detention? When there's a detention, the detained person must be escorted back to the scene of his arrest. Nobody puts you in a black and white and takes you back home.
There are no other comment cards on item number 5. We're now on item number 6. Closed session items. We have 3 cards. Prentice Jenkins, Ted Hayes, and Matthew Preston Schubert. Mr. Hayes.
In custody death. There was some mention of that. I couldn't quite read it on the graph because it was blown up with your PowerPoint. Incidentally, on that PowerPoint, the page had streetcar tracks or railroad tracks. I've never seen that anywhere in L.A. What was that supposed to be? What was that opening page supposed to suggest? I have no idea.
Mr. Hayes, the agenda item is the officer-involved shooting.
Officer-involved shooting was...
We're off of the general comment, right?
Right. Are you taking my time? Is this a trick? Are you exhausting my time, sir?
I'm asking you to speak to the topic, please.
Are you so sensitive that this really bothers you? Really? What I'm talking about bothers anyone. Anyway, in custody with 3 officers. Apparently, this was not a person who died in a jail or anything like that. Somehow this person died in some kind of detained situation rather than being confined in the jailhouse. But this is, I think, the 4th time I've made notice of the fact that these in-custody deaths occur. And I think somewhere in your brochure, your limited color brochure, you talk about in-custody deaths. I would like to get several copies of these because other people need them. Who do I see about that?
Copies of
this.
Mr. T. Fanker, the executive summary, I know it's available online. How is it available to members of the public?
We'll give Mr. Hayes a couple of extra copies.
Okay. Thank you.
There are no other comment cards. We're now going to recess. The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss item numbers 6A, 1, 2, and 3 in accordance with Government Code 54957.
surprised, actually. Happy.
Tammy, is it ready?
At this point, which is, that, I mean, I don't think you experienced, but it was every step of the way was good.
Ready?
You don't understand. Probably ever would get in the middle.
Are you ready with the microphone?
So,
Okay.
It's a new day out there.
yeah, should be.
So Matt, if Anne's here, I'll join you. Do you have time or not?
Yeah.
Do you mind?
The Board of Police Commissioners has concluded its work in closed session. We're back in open session. In closed session, item number 6A1 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. In closed session, item number 6A2 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. And in closed session, item number 6A3 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. Mr. President, is there a motion to adjourn?
We have a motion. We have a motion and a second, and everyone is in favor.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Cut, print, we're moving on. Hi, I'm Shane Woodson on the set of Cain and Abel here in Hollywood. You're watching LA City View, Channel 35. Our city, our channel. Okay, I need my actors back on set, back in position.